Japanimation Station.
'Hello and welcome to Japanimation Station, an anime podcast brought to you by the folks at the Weekly Stuff Podcast. I'm Sean Chapman.
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
And we are here once again to dive into the wild and wacky world of anime. This week on the show, we are continuing our journey through Season 3 of Japanimation Station and Lupin III, our adventures of the classic Lupin III, where we have done Lupin III Part 1, we have done The Mystery of Mamo, the movie, and now we are talking about the very, very long TV show, Lupin III Part 2, which is 155 episodes long. And we are not talking about 155 episodes. We have taken a sampling of different episodes across the entire length of the show, because this would be its own whole podcast series if we did a whole one on Lupin III Part 2. And we're gonna dive into the really good and the really weird episodes of Lupin III Part 2.
Indeed. So it is probably important to say right up front that this show, Lupin III Part 2, aired 1977 from 1980, is one of the most popular and enduring anime ever made by a variety of metrics. Like, this is easily one of the most probably widely seen anime that we have ever talked about on this show. And it is by far the most popular and enduring and influential era of Lupin III, which is why we're spending basically 3 weeks here. The Mystery of Mamo, which we talked about last week, it came out during the run of Part 2. Next week, we're going to cover the Castle of Cagliostro and the episodes Hayao Miyazaki directed himself for this series. So if you're wondering, hey, why are they not talking today about the two most famous episodes of Lupin III ever aired? We're going to do those next week because thematically they kind of all go together. But this show, you know, just as evidenced by its length, 155 episodes, for reference to another show that people would know, the original Dragon Ball was only 153. So this is a big, big show that was very popular when they started making the annual specials that we're going to get to in future episodes. Those very much took from Part 2's aesthetic and all of that. So this is kind of like the canonical anime Lupin experience in sort of how it came out into the world. So this is a big one today.
Yeah, because this is also where, like, the sort of final version of the original cast is all together here. This is where Yuji Ono did the music, right? Because some of that stuff we saw in Mamo, but the nature of wanting to do that connected to Part 1, because that was a kind of a Part 1 movie, we sort of saw those there. But really, all of that kind of what you think of as the sort of finished product of classic Lupin, that all comes from Part 2.
Yes, indeed. So, yeah, we are talking about, as Sean said, I kind of went through. I had not done a super deep dive on Part 2 before. I'd seen some episodes here and there. So I collected from a variety of sources. I looked at sort of various fan rankings, various critic rankings, also just kind of looking through the episodes and finding ones I thought would sound interesting. Like, there was one called Lupin versus Superman, and I just wanted to see that one, and it actually was one of my favorites. It's a delightful episode. But yeah, so I just kind of picked as good a cross-sampling for a number of episodes that I thought would be doable within one episode of Japanimation Station. You know, one thing to keep in mind throughout today's review is that I want to make clear, like, none of our takes can be particularly definitive because we've only seen about a fifth of the episodes. So, and we've seen a cross-section of ones that were fairly highly recommended, and I think for good reason. A lot of these are really great. So it's a little different than how we usually review a show, but with a series like this that is purely episodic and has no serialization, I also think this is a completely fair way to do it, especially as an introduction to the series, which is kind of what this season of Japanimation Station is all about.
Yeah, because I think there's only two ways you could really do podcasts for Lupin III Part 2. Either you do what we're doing, where you're just taking a broad sampling and trying to do like a big picture perspective on it, or you do like 10 episode chunks or something, and you just go through it very methodically like that, because as with any like big anime that is like this, that runs for several years, every week is a new episode, and you're getting over 100 episodes, like, this is like a dozen different TV shows in one in some ways, right? Like the art style changes dramatically over the course of it. The genres per episode can be wildly different. The quality of the animation can be wildly different. So it is a weird show to try to talk about in that way, because it is a lot less defined than most of the anime that we typically have discussed, whether on Japanimation Station or Weekly Sugundam, which have been more focused, like, this is a single 26 episode thing, or this is a single 50 episode thing, or something like that. This is your like Pokemon style, we're just fucking going, and we're going until we can't go no more, and you know, an episode's going to come out next week, come hell or high water, and that will get you some really interesting stuff, it'll get you some like mediocre stuff, and occasionally it'll get you some really amazing stuff. And that's very much was my experience with Lupin III Part 2, is like you are jumping around all over the place from wildly different episodes in quality, in style, in genre, sometimes in characterization for some of the main characters. I enjoyed this show a lot, but it is a very different kind of show than the kind of show that we typically look at. It's very, very different than Lupin III Part 1 in terms of style. It's just a different kind of thing.
Absolutely. And honestly, I had so much fun with it. I thought it was, even when you would get a more mediocre episode, I think the sort of whatever you're going to get every week, it was so fun to kind of jump through and see all of this, and kind of how the show evolves over time. I found it really interesting. You know, one way you could think about it, and I think this is truer for maybe the early episodes, because I do think the show branches out more as it goes along, but I would say the best way to describe it that I thought of early on is this is kind of like Lupin III, the Saturday morning cartoon. And I don't mean that derogatorily at all. I mean that in the sense that it is exactly kind of what you think of when you think of Lupin III, in that every episode has a certain number of elements it's going to hit. So you're going to have, you know, the 5 characters are going to be there every episode. You're always going to have Zenigata chasing Lupin around. You're always going to have Lupin and the gang doing different heists and things. And it is also a more, again, this changes over the run of the show. Generally, it is a more kid-friendly version of Lupin III. There are some episodes for which that is absolutely not the case, which is hilarious, including one that has a torture scene on Goemon that is, like, worthy of 24 or something. It is so intense.
It would. Jack Bauer would blush to see some of the shit that Goemon goes through. He's like, you guys need to calm down. Damn. This is crazy, is what Jack Bauer would say.
So again, that changes a little bit, but I do think like this being sort of the big Saturday morning cartoon version of Lupin is kind of how I would describe it. Although again, I do think the show, from what we saw, gets more adventurous over time. And I will say, the back like half of the episodes I listed is just kind of hit after hit after hit after hit. There's a lot of good ones in here. And again, we are taking a cross section, but I found that interesting.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I found interesting was that it absolutely is Saturday morning cartoon Lupin, as you're saying, in that it is much more of a fully formed show than Part 1 was, where we talked about with like Part 1, it was not kind of surprising that show struggled because it had a hard sort of core setup to do the every week we're doing a different episode, because the main cast was not fully conducive to that. Whereas here, the main crew of Lupin and Jigen and Goemon and Fujiko are much more tight-knit, so it makes a lot more sense that they can be in every single episode, even if that means sometimes their character relationships aren't always as interesting as some of the stuff you got, particularly early in Part 1. They're much more conducive to, we're doing an episode every week. And then Zenigata's role is also much more clearly defined, although it's a lot like what you got in the second half of Part 1, but it's that, like, he's going to come in to try to foil Lupin every single week. Kind of thing. And so it's got all of that structure to it, but It is, and even early on, it is a lot more risque than I thought it would be. It is more violent. It has more of this kind of eroticism in there than I expected, which I was kind of worried about, because I think some of that edge to Lupin is pretty vital to its identity. And it's certainly nowhere near as much as something like you got in some scenes in like Mamo, or some of the stuff in early part one. Although there's a couple of episodes that kind of get there, that feel like that Goemon episode, that feel like, okay, this could fit in very neatly with some of the darker stuff in part one. But throughout the whole show, it still has those elements, honestly, more so than the second half of part one did. This is not as kind of like sanitized or heroic feeling as you get sometimes in the second half of part one when Miyazaki's got his sort of like thumb on the scales as much. Obviously, we'll watch Cagliostro and watch his 2 episodes, so we'll see stylistically. I don't know if that is like what we had then. But this is very much still the more kind of anarchic Lupin. The people die in episodes, and that is true early. It is also very true the second half of the show, and there's a lot more sort of like eroticism, and you know, Fujiko gets to be sexy and stuff like that. They do all of those things, and that's still a part of the show. And that is something that I was very pleased to see, because I think it helps retain the fundamental identity of the franchise while still molding it into something that you can have 155 episodes of, which was not true of part one.
Absolutely. And when I say Saturday morning, I don't necessarily mean that it's just like watered down kids fluff. But, you know, like Batman the Animated Series is also like a Saturday morning cartoon version of Batman. This is kind of like the Lupin version of that to some degree, of like, it is this version that can kind of come in every week and do something and feel like, and it is in a lot of ways kind of the definitive Lupin cartoon. And I very much understood watching this why it landed the way it did and has the reputation it has, because, man, I finished watching the episodes we listed today, Sean, and I just wanted to go watch more and start filling in gaps. Part of the fun was also, because we were jumping around, every episode has a next episode preview, but we often weren't watching the next episode, and I would often be very enticed to just go see what the hell is going on with this next episode. But of course, we had a set number we needed to watch for this podcast, but I definitely want to see more. This is a great show. Like, I don't want to dance around it. I think this is a fantastic anime. It is, as you say, Sean, it is an anime that ran for 155 episodes and will inevitably be uneven in some ways. But, like, not even at its peak, just regularly, it will have amazing jokes. It has amazing vocal work. It has one of the best soundtracks in the history of anime. And it frequently has stunning animation. Like, it has off days. It also has days where you go, I can't believe this aired in a 155 episode show. Like, this definitely has, and you know, a lot of like super, super talented names worked on this show when you look into it. It's a really cool work, and I really, really enjoyed watching this.
Yeah, I had the same thing that you did, where I was always frustrated at the end of the episode to not get to move on to whatever the next one is, because you just get some next on previews, you're like, what the fuck? Because that's even when an episode is mediocre, because some of the episodes we watched I don't think are particularly great or good, but they always have like at least a good idea in there. It's usually just like, for the bad episodes, the execution was off.
Yeah.
But there's always like a fun adventure at the heart of whatever it is. And so the next on previews were always really enticing, because you can always imagine in your head what is the ideal version of that episode going to be. Sometimes the actual episode doesn't always live up to that promise. But there's always the vision of the show is so clear, and the spirit of the show is so strong, that you know what a really good episode will be like. You know that like all those premises are things that the show could execute really well. It's just a question of like, is that going to be like what they do for that week, or is it going to be one of the off weeks? But you always wanted to see what it is. And it's definitely a show I will go back to and watch more episodes, you know, on my own time later on, because it is a show I had a lot of fun with. I think overall I probably preferred part one. I think it's slightly more my style, particularly the first half of part one. But I still really enjoyed watching the show, and it was always very exciting to see what brand of madness are you going to get on this episode. Is it going to be like genius, or is it going to be insanity? And it usually was one of those two things.
I think that's a great way of putting it. And yeah, I don't know quite where I'd put them. And it's also hard to judge because we've seen the entirety of part one and a sampling of part two. But I love them both. And I think they both do. I mean, it's hard to say what part one was setting out to do, but like whatever part one is, it's fascinating and beautiful. And I love that show. I do think like, it is no small, what you described earlier, Sean, of like finding a way to take what Lupin III is, which is this crazy, anarchic, Mad Magazine, 60s counterculture thing, and can we turn that into an engine that can reliably run for 3 years and 155 episodes? And they did find a way to do that, and that is no small thing. And I think that is, even in weeks where it does not work entirely, I would find it impressive just in, it's a world you like to spend time in. The characters are so good. The general tone is so interesting, even as the tone shifts a lot. And that's a major achievement. And obviously, like, this part 1 is not something you could have built a 50-year franchise off of for obvious reasons. Part 2 is, and it's cool to see how it kind of comes into its own in that way, even as I also love what part 1 was doing.
Yeah. So what's the history here, Jonathan? How does part 2 come about?
Well, let's talk about it. So, yeah, this aired October 1977 through October 1980. As we said, we should say the title of this show on screen is just Lupin Sansei, Lupin III. It was colloquially nicknamed New Lupin III, Shin Lupin Sansei in Japan, which was also the name of the second manga run that Monkey Punch was doing in the magazine at the same time. So that is how people in Japan referred to it at the time to distinguish it. When it was first released on DVD, the studio TMS titled it Lupin Sansei Second Series, but it was recently standardized for the 50th anniversary by TMS as Lupin III Part 2 globally because they matched kind of the titles of the series up. Starting with Part 3, the Pink Jacket Show, they started putting the part in the official title, and then the modern series are called Part 4, Part 5, Part 6. So just a little note on the titles there. 1977 is also the year that Tokyo Movie, which was the studio we were talking about last time, reformed to be Tokyo Movie Shinsha, later shortened to TMS. So this is where you actually have, like the TMS logo is on the show that we recognize today. Just a little note there, the show did not change hands. It's just the name of the studio shifted. The first anime had not been a huge success upon its initial airing, as we talked about, but it did become increasingly popular in reruns, which led to the creation of this second series. And then this show was a kind of hit throughout its run and hit similar numbers in some of its places, in some of its episodes to some of those reruns that we talked about last time, Sean, where, like a rerun of the finale of part 1 reached like a 33% share. I think the first airing of the final episode of part 2 did something similar. So the ratings were very big here. And then you had 2 movies made during the show's run, The Mystery of Mama, which we talked about last week because that show was that film was primarily made by a lot of the part 1 people. And then Castle of Cagliostro, which is some of those artists again, like Yasuo Otsuka plus Hayao Miyazaki coming back, and we will discuss that next week. As for the people who were there for part 2 day to day, it's mostly different people than were there on part 1 because a lot of those part 1 artists were still involved. They were largely working on the films. You had Yuzo Aoki was here a lot. He was one of the key animators from part 1 who did a lot of storyboarding and key animation for part 2. You had Yasuo Otsuka kind of coming in and out, and he was also working on the film, so he was not there for the episodes all the time. But the show, and one thing to note about the credits is we are still early enough in anime history that when part 2 starts, anime credits are not standardized yet. You do not have what we have now, and what you would even have by the end of the 70s of your series director role and your series composer role, and that is sort of like, I always describe that as sort of like in American TV, we have the showrunner. That position is like split into 2 positions in Japan. You have the person overseeing the direction and the person overseeing the writing. And then individual episodes have individual directors and writers. Part 2 does not quite have that at the outset, although it does develop credits like that as it goes along, which is kind of interesting. It is primarily directed by Kyosuke Mikuriya, who is credited with 82 episodes, and Yasumi Mikamoto, who is credited with another 43, and then there are a couple of other people throughout. Kyosuke Mikuriya, who did the most here, he's kind of a journeyman director from this period who worked on a lot of shows and a lot of projects in what I think of as kind of the Lupin post-Toei, pre-Ghibli team universe, like Isao Takahata's Chie the Brat series. He did 17 episodes of that. And if people know the Hayao Miyazaki show Sherlock Hound, Miyazaki did the first 6 of that. Before that show, there was a big financing issue, and then Miyazaki left to go make Nausicaa, and then they did make 20 more of it. He's the guy who came in and finished that show, so you might know his work there. And he also was one of the lead directors on Kyojin no Hoshi, Star of the Giants, which is one of the first big sports anime. He kept working into the early 2000s. I thought it was funny. One of his final credits is the 4th episode of Naruto. No other Naruto, but he's the 4th episode.
So it's probably a good one. All those early episodes are very good, so...
Yeah.
I do not remember off the top of my head what happened in the 4th episode of Naruto.
That's okay. And then Yasumi Mikamoto, who did 43 episodes of this, his career stretches all the way back to Mighty Atom. He directed episodes on that. He was also one of the lead directors on Chie the Brat with Mikuriya. He did a lot of Riding the Brave, which is a Yoshiyuki Tomino show. He did 13 of that. He also worked on the Macross franchise. And he also directed 1 episode of Naruto. He did Shippuden episode 119. I think that is funny that the 2 main directors of Lupin III Part 2 each did 1 episode of Naruto.
You know, it's like you just gotta touch it. You know, it's just like, you know, Naruto is the glowing sun of the anime. You just gotta put your hand on that thing, you know?
Yep, a few other one-off directors are those who did just a few episodes, most notably Hayao Miyazaki under the pseudonym Tsutomi Teruka, who wrote, storyboarded, and directed episodes 145 and 155, the finale, after directing Cagliostro. We will talk about all of that next week. And in one of my favorite bits, because this involves my favorite episode of Part 2, it's long been rumored, never confirmed, although it's pretty clear what happened here, that Yoshiyuki Tomino directed on the series. Weekly Suit Gundam listeners will be very familiar with his name. Those coming new to Japanimation Station, he's the creator of Gundam. He's like our boy. And it is rumored that he worked on this series under the pseudonym Yagi Ishikura, who is credited as director for episodes 58, 75, and 93, and storyboard artist for those episodes plus 63 and 94. Tomino is someone who used a dizzying number of pseudonyms in this period. A lot of animators did at the time, but Tomino really loved his pseudonyms. And he first used the Yagi Ishikura pseudonym as the storyboard artist of episode 19 of Daitarn 3, one of his robot shows, which aired on October 21st, 1978. And episode 58 of Lupin Part 2, which is the first Ishikura episode, aired just a few weeks later on November 13th, 1978, leading to, and because Yagi Ishikura is not a person with any other credits in anime history, this is why it is believed Tomino did that one. And I did not know that when I watched the episode, but episode 58, which is the one where Jigen has this sort of romance with this woman, getting her across the border, is my favorite episode of Part 2. It's a fucking masterpiece. And then I saw it was Tomino, and I'm like, boy, we cannot escape this guy.
Yeah, no, I had the exact same thing where that is either that's the best episode or it's like it's in the top. There's like probably 3 or 4 episodes that we watched that for me are like the okay, these are the best episodes, and that's one of them. And I had the exact same thing where after that episode, I was so floored by it that I was like, who the fuck directed this episode? Because this episode is so good, and there was a certain je ne sais quoi to it that had a Tomino kind of feel, because I had this like, it kind of feels like a little bit like Mobile Suit Gundam stuff, because it's around the same time that Mobile Suit Gundam came out. There's a kind of pseudo psychedelic sequence there that is a lot like some of the stuff that happens near the end of that show, when like Amuro is on the side where he meets Lala Soon. There's a sequence that's very similar to that. And then I looked it up, and there's like saw all those rumors. I'm like, goddamn, dude, holy shit. Like that is spot on. Yes, like I absolutely believe that he directed it. You know, despite pseudonym stuff, it feels pretty clear to me just watching the episode. If I had like the instinct that this feels a lot like Tomino, not having any idea, I didn't think that he worked on any Lupin stuff, and I looked it up and there's that rumor. It seems pretty clear that he must have been the one who made it.
And it makes sense because he was running in the exact same circles as all the other people working on these shows. It's honestly slightly surprising he didn't work on Part 1 when you look at like the list of names and people, because he very much comes from the same, he's cut from the same cloth. All right, and we will talk about that one because that is a great episode. But yeah, in fact, I will say right off the bat, Daisuke Jigen is absolutely the character Part 2 does best, I think. Like, his episodes, almost all my favorite Part 2 episodes are the Jigen-centric episodes. Basically, that is the character when Part 2 decides we're doing a Jigen episode, you're going to get, like, a fucking masterpiece. It's amazing.
Yes, yeah. Almost all of my favorite episodes are the Jigen episodes, so yes.
Yeah. All right. In terms of writing, as I said, this did not have a series composition credit early on until episode 52. Episode 52, there are two major credits they add at the beginning of the show that are effectively kind of the version of series composition and director, although they aren't directly called that. But from episode 52 to the end, the opening is writing by Atsushi Yamatoya, who we talked about last week. He was the writer of the Mystery of Mamo film, and he was a figure in the Japanese New Wave. He wrote Branded to Kill for Seijun Suzuki. He wrote and directed several Pink films for Nikatsu. We covered him on last week's episode. Prior to episode 52 of Lupin, he also wrote episodes 4, 23, 26, 29, 31, 32, and then he is later on individually credited for 99 and 103. 99, The Scattered Magnum, is my other favorite episode of Part 2. So it is fair to say he is the most influential writer on this series, as he did a big chunk of the first year of episodes, and then in years 2 and 3, he was credited as sort of the lead writer. It's hard to find exact literature on how that kind of broke out, because again, these were sort of a new way to think of credits at the time in anime, but I think you can feel his influence. There's definitely an affinity with Mamo, and I think that vision of Lupin that is married here.
Yeah, because we watched episode 32 there, which is Lupin dies twice, and I specifically in my notes made a note that there are a couple of scenes in that are very similar to some scenes at the end of Branded to Kill. So that felt like, you can feel that style is there very clearly, I think.
That's another one of my favorite episodes.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, again, lots of good people working on this, including the genuine article, the Branded to Kill director himself, Seijun Suzuki, one of the most important figures of 1960s Japanese cinema, firebrand studio director at Nikatsu, who eventually got so crazy they fired him, and he was blacklisted from the industry after the movie Branded to Kill he did with Yamatoya. Yep. This is all, and I'm not joking, he was blacklisted. He could not work with the studio system. And part of what he does, it takes about 15 years before he makes another live-action film. He comes back and makes this series of sort of experimental films called the Taisho trilogy now. You can actually, that's gotten a recent Blu-ray release, which is cool. I'm excited to see those at some point. But in that intervening period, he winds up joining the Lupin team, and he takes the credit of supervisor in the opening credits, starting with episode 52, same as when Yamatoya takes the writing credit. It's hard for me to tell, just looking around and doing what research I could, what his exact role or involvement was. In a lot of literature on the series by fans and critics, he is referred to as the director of Part 2, which isn't quite accurate, but this is maybe roughly analogous to that role we think of as a series director today, not the person who is working episodically but overseeing production. Suzuki would later be credited as director on the Part 3 movie, The Legend of the Gold of Babylon, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks, and he wrote one episode for that show. So he was obviously very influential on the style of Lupin from the beginning, and he worked on this show himself, and it is just endlessly surreal to me to start episodes of Lupin III and see supervisor Seijun Suzuki in the middle of that theme song. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, and if people haven't watched any of his movies, I've only seen 2 of them. I've seen Tokyo Drifter and I've seen Branded to Kill, and both of them are fucking incredible. So people, if they have not, if you're interested in that, they're fairly experimental. They're not your traditional movies in terms of narrative and stuff. But they're also not that far out there. If you've gone a little bit off of the beaten path with film watching, so people should go check those movies out because they're fucking great. And if you like Lupin III, you absolutely should watch those movies because they're stylistically of a piece, and they're great.
Yeah, Tokyo Drifter. You could do some minor rewrites and make that a Lupin III movie. It wouldn't be that hard to take the script of Tokyo Drifter and rework it. It's great. But yeah, so there you go. Seijun Suzuki, supervisor of Part 2 of Lupin III. Part 2. So animation for this show, notably again, this show ran for 155 episodes. That means there was not one animation house doing the whole show, because that would be impossible. So, like a lot of long-running shows, there were multiple studios doing the animation. You have Tokyo Movie, which is TMS, and that is their in-house animation. You have O Pro, and then you have Telecom and Topcraft. Telecom doesn't come in until episode 72, and they are another division of TMS that is created to help with the workload on Lupin Part 2, but goes on to be a really influential animation house. They will also be the studio that animates Cagliostro and a lot of the late episodes of Part 2. And then Telecom, TMS winds up doing a lot of international work in later years. And so Telecom is one of the studios that did a bunch of animation on Batman the Animated Series. So they are real pros there, and a lot of the kind of influential Tokyo Movie people wind up migrating to Telecom over the run of Part 2. And then you have Topcraft. Topcraft is a studio that was founded in 1972 by former Toei animators. They are known for their worldwide work with Rankin Bass. They did not do the stop-motion Rankin Bass stuff like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, although that also was a Japanese studio. But they did do some of the hand-drawn animation, including they are the studio that animated the extraordinarily weird Return of the King movie that gave us the unrivaled banger Where There's a Whip, There's a Way. Their most famous work ever is Hayao Miyazaki's Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. They are the studio that animates Nausicaa. And they went bankrupt a couple years after that, in 1985. And when they went bankrupt, Hayao Miyazaki, Isao Takahata, and Toshio Suzuki got together to acquire its assets and form Studio Ghibli. So Topcraft is basically the precursor to Studio Ghibli, if you're wondering that exact legacy. And I think that's also just a very interesting fact of all of this. And then that other studio I mentioned, O Pro, they're very much kind of the stars of the first half of Part 2, with animator Kazuhige Tomonaga is kind of the big one there, contributing really flamboyant and expressive animation throughout that. I found a really great piece on archive.org through the Wayback Machine from an old fan site called Annie Pages that did this big breakdown of the animation of Lupin III Part 2, and it was really interesting to go through that, and he documented a lot of credits and sort of who did what. Because again, when this show is cooking, its animation it's kind of like Part 1 in that way, where you're like, this is a cut above what was airing on TV at the time when it's really cooking. And again, it was a weekly show, so it is not always cooking, but man, when it is, it's something else.
Yeah, I mean, episode 99 specifically is some of the best TV animation I have ever seen.
Yes.
So it's like, yeah, it is definitely, there is a wide range of animation quality you see in this show. But when it's good, it is good in a way that like most shows don't even get close to, really.
Episode 99 has a sequence that we will talk about that is indistinguishable from a movie. Just fully indistinguishable.
So much so that I was like, is there another Lupin movie that came out and they just like took this scene from that? Because that's not, that wouldn't be unheard of. And in the same way that the Lupin III Part 1 reused animation from the pilot film or whatever, which is a lot higher quality than your average cuts. But no, that was just an original sequence made for that episode. So yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, as you can identify, there are a lot of like all-time great classic Japanese animators that worked on this. And I am also very delighted to know that the Return of the King movie, that one-off animated Return of the King movie was animated by the studio that's the precursor to Ghibli. I hope that Ghibli, can get the rights back and can release it with their logo on it and everything. Just like bring that back into the fold as one of the Ghibli propers.
I have my whole shelf of Studio Ghibli Blu-rays because they have their own kind of style for them, and they've put in some special releases. Like Cagliostro has a release in that Ghibli line just because it's a Miyazaki movie and kind of for fun, put it in there. That would be hilarious if they did that for Return of the King, so you could slot it in right between Cagliostro and Nausicaa, just two pillars of Japanese animation history, and right in the middle, where there's a whip, there's a way.
Hell yeah, brother.
In any case, some of the other names to note here are character designer and animation director for the run of the series. There's a couple of credits to that, but the one who is there from beginning to end is Takeo Kitahara. This is probably his most significant work in anime history, but he has a lot of design and key animation credits in this period, like Kyojin no Hoshi and Sherlock Hound and Chie the Brat. He later did a lot of the City Hunter shows in the 1980s and was one of the 3 animation directors on Gundam F91, which is I think, the best animated Gundam Gundam thing. So, good people. Kenji Kodama is also credited as animation director on almost 100 episodes of this show, and he's a huge figure. He later became a director on stuff like City Hunter, Detective Conan, Rose of Versailles. He was a TMS man. He worked on a lot of those shows. And your directors of photography, not a credit I note that much, except that these guys, Hajime Hasegawa and Kenichi Kobayashi, what director of photography means in anime effectively is, credit should be compositor. It is the person who layers the animation, and it is photography. It is shooting each individual cell, but it is more about the composition than anything. But it is an important role. But those two guys, Kobayashi and Hasegawa, their names you will see everywhere, particularly on Lupin. They continue in this role for pretty much every Lupin project we will be talking about on this season of Japanimation Station, and then on a shit ton of TMS productions like Detective Conan and Anpanman. So I just thought I would mention them as well, because this is where they enter Lupin, and they do not leave until 2002. Mm-hmm. And then, Sean, I think probably the most important contributor to Part 2 in an overall sense in terms of defining the legacy of Lupin III is our new musician here, Yuji Ono. Yuji Ono is a classically trained pianist and jazz musician. He started recording jazz in the 1960s, and he latched on to Lupin III in 1977 and never looked back. He has composed every Lupin anime, TV special, and film since Part 2, other than the film The Fuma Conspiracy and the TV series The Woman Called Fujiko Mine and the films associated with that show. Ono's body of work on Lupin is so ludicrously vast that I spent time. I could not find anything approaching a comprehensive accounting of the number of albums that have come out with his name on it for Lupin music. There is a sub-series that he's been recording since the 90s called Lupin III Jazz that is usually him, he plays piano, and his jazz trio, or You and the Explosion Band, which is the credit for all of the in-show music. And that series on its own, this is not score for the shows, this is just extra fun albums that he does as a jazz musician. That series has so many albums that I cannot find a full accounting of them. And it is also a really great series. There's actually, a lot of these are on Apple Music and Spotify now. Just Google or search in those services Lupin III Jazz, and they're really good. My favorite version of his Lupin theme is from the album Lupin III Another Jazz. It's the 2002 version. There's a 2017 album I listened to this morning called Let's Fall in Jazz, which is amazing. It is Yuji Ono and his trio, so it is drums, bass, and piano, and it's just fantastic. It includes Lin, the singer who did all the Persona 5 music on the title track, singing a song called Let's Fall in Jazz. And speaking of Persona, I have to imagine Shoji Meguro grew up watching Lupin III, because boy, howdy do you feel its influence, I think, on a lot of what he does on Persona and a lot of anime. I think Lupin III Part 2, which is where most of the big Lupin themes come from, probably has a pretty competitive argument to make for one of, if not the best and most significant anime soundtracks ever, given the sheer pedigree that this music takes on. I mean, a lot of songs in Part 2 have just become like full-on standards for covers and all sorts of things. And of course, he's continued doing it for 50 years. And it is indeed, I think, as good an anime score as you will ever find.
Yeah, it definitely has that quality where I think if you obviously, if you're actually Japanese, but all of you, if you just watch enough anime and stuff like that, there's a shocking number of tracks in Lupin III Part 2 that you're like, I have heard this somewhere. I don't know where, I don't know in what context, but I have heard this song somewhere. And it kind of constantly happens. I mean, so much so, part of it is we did also watch Mystery Mama that has a lot of the music in it also, but I often forgot that it's this is the first time I'm watching this show, or this is the first time I'm technically hearing the soundtrack, or at least in this context, because most of it was music that either I had heard, or it just has such a kind of classic feel to it that it kind of automatically feels nostalgic. It's that kind of music. Yeah, it's a great soundtrack. And I think it really works well that the show goes to such a different musical style, right? Going from the very bluesy Lupin III Part 1 to very jazzy Lupin III Part 2. I like that they went for a very different style here, because I love, I couldn't choose my babies between these two, the Lupin III Part 2 soundtrack or the Part 1 soundtrack. They're both as good. And I think it would have been hard if they tried to replicate the part one soundtrack, I don't think it would work because it is so singular. That's such an interesting, different kind of anime soundtrack. So they went for a different, interesting, but also very unique feeling anime soundtrack. And yeah, the music is fucking phenomenal.
Because it's real jazz. Like we've talked about this like when we reviewed Mobile Suit Gundam Thunderbolt, which goes for a very free jazz kind of thing. You know, jazz as a score is sometimes a hard thing to do because jazz, like real jazz, is not something you can easily like sync up with animation, right? But I think and of course a lot of the music in here is more standardized than your standard sort of jazz forms, but it says a lot that all of this music has been reimagined as just stuff a jazz trio can play in those various albums, and it's very seamless on there. It's just constant, and he's adding new music throughout the run of the series, which is also cool. Like the Zenigata March, for instance, is not there in a lot of the early episodes, but you add this Zenigata theme that is used in really playful ways as you go along with the show. When Mystery of Mamo comes out, that one has a mostly original soundtrack, and a lot of that then gets brought in, including the theme song changes to be the Mystery of Mamo version. Cagliostro does not have as much original music written just for it. It's using a lot of the TV pieces, but it was also much later in the run, so that kind of makes sense. And Cagliostro was made on a more compressed timetable. And the big original song from that movie is not used in the show. When you see it, you'll see why. I think it's kind of too tied to what Cagliostro is doing. But yeah, it's just one of my favorite anime scores ever. And this is absolutely a cheat because this song exists in so many forms. But my favorite anime theme song is Yuji Ono's Lupin III theme song. That song has been redone roughly 7 billion times if you look for it. Like there are different versions for every show, for every like 50 episodes of this show, for every jazz album. But it is such a perfect, energetic theme that you hear 2 bars of it and you're like, that's Lupin III. It just embodies the energy of this series so beautifully. It is so malleable to so many different forms. I love it with the vocals. I love it without the vocals. I just love that song so much.
Yeah, it's great. It's I like that they keep it through the whole show. They do different variants of it, but it is fundamentally the same tune. It's like it's like that like it does feel like it's just tied so directly into the identity of the show that you kind of can't change it. There would be no point in, you want to give a little bit of variation to it, but you don't want to do a different song. So I appreciated that they kind of just stuck with it. Because it's great.
If you break down the theme songs, the first 26 episodes just have your basic original version of that theme, where it is horns doing the melody. In the second 26 episodes, you have the vocal version by a vocalist called Pete Mack Jr., which is a great name. And I love that. I think the vocals, like, I could not help. I was singing along every single time I saw it because it is the most fucking karaoke friendly. You just want to belt that sucker out. I love it. And I actually wish it was used a little longer. It's only in 26 episodes. And then 52 to 103 use the theme from Mystery of Mamo. It's slightly re-edited, but it is that arrangement that is a little more, I don't know what you call it, it's more synthy. It uses more synthesized sounds. And then from 104 to 155, you get Lupin III 1980, which is just a big not orchestral, but like jazzy reimagining of it that is also very good. And I've also just got to praise, I think the visuals on the theme songs get so cool and adventurous. The second section, the one with the vocal version, is my favorite. It's got these crazy, colorful kind of pop imagery to it that is really cool. They always find fun things for Zenigata to be doing in the background of these openings. It's great. And they also, for the first, third, and fourth openings, do something that I have to ask you, Sean, if you've ever seen an anime do this. It credits the actors just as the main cast, almost like an American sitcom, where you open it and it's like Lupin III, played by Yasuo Yamada, and Jigen Daisuke, played by Kiyoshi Kobayashi. And it does that consistently as the main cast for all of the theme songs.
Yeah, I can't think of an example of another show that does that. It's definitely like, it feels a lot more American, where you're used to that for a lot of American shows from like the pre-2000s. But yeah, I can't think of another anime that does that. It's cool because it does it just really feels like, that core cast is so the kind of like center of the show. So it makes sense that the the theme song animation always centers them, and it's always about kind of giving them like a cool spotlight in some cool section. It's one of the things that was kind of a shame about jumping around so much, is that you never got to stick around with one version of the opening animation for too long. So I feel like I never got like fully used to one, and then we were on to the next one. It's one of the reasons why I want to go back and watch a bunch of the show on the other episodes we haven't seen, just to like get more of that, like get like familiar with that one era or whatever of that version of the show before you move on.
The end themes are also great. You have a non-vocal and a vocal version of the song that is just called Love Theme, but I do like the Love Theme a lot. It's an iconic Lupin piece. One of the most iconic pieces from Part 2 is called Love Squall. It has an orchestral version that is in the show, and then a vocal version that is the third end theme. That is also one that is like an absolute mainstay of all the Lupin jazz albums. It translates to jazz really well. And then Love is Everything for the final theme. Love Squall is definitely my favorite in both, I think, animation and song, but these are all great as well.
Yeah, definitely. This is another one of those, like, you have heard this song somewhere kind of thing, because, yes, it is just like, I have no idea in what context I've heard those songs before, but I have definitely heard them before I watched these episodes.
Yes. I also want to note, as we're wrapping up the history section, that Lupin III Part 2 is the Lupin series that effectively broke through in America. Not to like a crazy degree like Dragon Ball Z, but it did have a foothold. Its first effort at localization was in 1995 when Streamline Pictures released the first two just the two, there aren't more, the two Miyazaki episodes. They also dubbed Cagliostro, but they released the two episodes as Tales of the Wolf because this was when they couldn't use the name Lupin. And then they released them again on VHS as Lupin III's Greatest Capers. This is the Bob Bergen dub. Bob Bergen is the guy who took over as Porky Pig for Looney Tunes. And he voices him also in the streamlined dub of Cagliostro. Then in 2002, TMS struck a deal with Pioneer to distribute the series in the US. They produced the big English dub, which you will often see called the Pioneer/Genion dub, and that is because Pioneer changed its name to Genion during the run. But this is the cast that has become the iconic Lupin English cast. They bring these folks back for every new dub of Tony Oliver, Richard Epcar, Michelle Ruff, and Lex Lang. And they dubbed the first 79 episodes, and these were released on 15 DVD volumes from 2003 to 2006. 26 of the first 27 episodes, minus episode 3, which is called Hitler's Legacy. They just didn't want that. The episode is not like Lupin joins the Nazis. I think it's one of the mini Lupin plots where they're searching for Nazi gold, but it is called Hitler's Legacy, and so they didn't air that one. But the other 26 aired on Adult Swim in 2003, and definitely had an impact. There's a lot of people who remember the show from that period. And then episodes 28 through 52, plus episode 3, later aired in Canada on G4 Tech TV in 2007. So this was the first English airing of Lupin on TV. Genion lost the distribution rights after those first 79 episodes. Richard Epcar, who is the voice of Jigen and also directs a lot of the recent Lupin dubs, he's said they dubbed up through episode 104, but if those dubs still exist, they have never surfaced. When Discotek did their release of Lupin the Third Part 2 on DVD, they did include the 79 dubbed episodes and the streamlined dub of 145 and 155, but did not have anything beyond that point, so those might be, if they exist, lost to time. And one other note on home video releases is that Part 2 is the only Lupin anime that has yet to have a high-definition version created. Masters were made in 2009 for DVD in Japan from the 16mm master film material and best surviving materials, but the high degree of reruns that Part 2 experienced meant that some materials don't survive in great condition, which is probably why, and that combined with the length of the show means there has not been an attempt at like doing a giant 4K scan. The masters were done in standard definition. I would say they look a lot like the Dragon Box restorations of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, which is to say, I would say a top-notch, very good standard def restoration. I don't necessarily need more than what we have. They look very good as they are. There is a Blu-ray of these in Japan, but those are an upscale. There has not been a high-def version, and that's why current versions in the US from Discotek are DVD only, because there is no native high-def version to release. These actually wound up being the last DVDs Discotek put out before they went to Blu-ray only, and kind of never looked back on that. So, yeah, that is some other interesting stuff.
Yeah, and I have to assume that the puntastic alternate English titles come from the English dub, right?
Yes.
Because I do want to shout those out because we're going to, because they stop at a certain point, and I was really sad when we stopped getting the pun titles. Because you normally, I'm on record of usually not being way into the tendency we have in English dub stuff of throwing in a bunch of random puns where they didn't exist or nothing equivalent existed in the original text. But the puns are so good. The alternate English titles are fucking incredible.
Yes.
And I was so sad when they stopped because they were so fucking funny. Yeah, it's whoever, whatever person or team of people was responsible for coming up with those titles, they fucking nailed it because they're so good.
And I have not seen a ton of the dub, but I do know part of its reputation is that it did include a lot of modern, like, puns and pop culture references that I think in a lot of contexts would probably be inappropriate for an anime dub. I can see the logic of that for Lupin. I think adapting it in a slightly anarchic way I think maybe works, and this dub is very beloved. And I did switch over a couple of times just to hear, and I understand why. Again, I think Tony Oliver is like absolutely the right English Lupin. Michelle Ruff, I can't imagine any other actress doing Fujiko in English. That's like the person. Richard Epcar's Jigen, I understand why people like him. Again, like, we don't listen to dubs much, but I want to be clear, if you like Lupin dubbed, I do get it, and I understand. Like, this is one that actually has a cast that has stuck around and built their roles, which is not always the case in anime, and it's cool that that has been out there.
Yeah, it's one of the like original reasons why I went away from watching dubs years ago was because it just got frustrating for shows that I liked. Even like mid-run, you would end up, oh, this guy's gone or this voice has changed, and that's like much less common in Japanese stuff. Because I also like would occasionally pop over and look at some of the scenes with the English dub, and they seemed very good. And while the titles typically weren't particularly jokey for the episodes, there are lots and lots and lots of Japanese pop culture references in the actual episodes. So it also makes sense that like you would want to match that tone for an American audience, because there are some of those pop culture references that that in the middle of the episode were completely inexplicable to me, and then I was like, what the fuck is going on here, and had to go Google it and try to track it down, sometimes successfully, often unsuccessfully. But it is a show that goes for more of that kind of referencey humor than like Part 1 did, for instance.
Yeah. All right. Sean, is there anything else you want to say about Part 2 in general before we start jumping through these episodes we watched?
I think we just have to jump through the episodes because it's a show that's impossible to say too much about in general because there's nothing in general about it, right? Like, each episode is so kind of unique, generally speaking, that it's hard to make like wide-ranging definitive statements about Lupin III Part 2.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I guess to note, and we talked about this a little bit in Mystery of Mamo, is that we do have the new voices for, it's new, they've been stuck around for 30 years, but the voices for Fujiko and Goemon, and I do think like, I think Fujiko in particular is the one who is least well used in Part 2, but I do think Eiko Masayama is like fantastic throughout, and I think Makio Inoue, who plays Goemon, he's really good at helping create a version of Goemon who feels like he's part of the team. In general, I think Goemon in particular, I think, shines in a lot of this show. Fujiko, it very much depends on who's doing the episode, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree that like Fujiko, I don't feel like we had any like, this is a great Fujiko episode. There might be some out there, and we just didn't end up having them in our list of episodes. But overall, she is the character that feels like the performance is a lot better, and the voice is fucking great. When we talked about it in Mamo as well, it is a much better performance vocally, but it is a thing where each episode has to kind of figure out what role does she play, what like relationship does he have to Lupin and the gang. There are some episodes where she seems to be truly distraught at the mortal peril that Lupin is in, and there are some episodes where she's legitimately just trying to murder Lupin, and there's no twist, there's nothing else, like it's not a reveal at the end where no, she was secretly, no, she was just going to fucking put a bullet in his head, and that was just part of the plot of the episode, and you're like, this is one of the many things about Lupin III Part 2 that you get some weird whiplash occasionally. But Goemon is the character that I think like kind of solidifies here. We talked about with Part 1 that it felt like he worked great for his first 2 episodes where he was adversarial. And then once he became a part of the gang, the show had absolutely no idea what the fuck to do with him. And this is kind of like what he was like in the Mamo movie, but it just gets to be sort of consistent, where he is a part of the gang. You kind of get what his relationship is and his friendship with Jigen and Lupin. He's in basically every episode, and he's usually relatively prominent in every episode. We got a couple of episodes that specifically focus on Goemon, and I still don't think he's ever as interesting as he was in his 2 part 1 episodes where he was an enemy. I still think that's like a cooler story to tell with the character, but it is a story that you could only do a couple of episodes on, or you had to have him be a running antagonist. And having him be a part of the gang gives him something consistent to do in a fun part of every episode. And then it gets to be, because here's something with part 2, it's globetrotting, right? You're not just focused on Japan, so you get to go to all these exotic locations. And then when they want to do a Japan episode, which there's a couple in this that do Japan episodes, Goemon gets to take front and center, and it gets to be like a ninja thing or a samurai thing, and they get to theme it that way. Like, Goemon just gets to serve a really valuable role in the overall show that way, even if I don't think any of his stuff to me was as good as his first episode in part 1.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I think the other fun thing they get to do with Goemon is because of the globetrotting, he is a crazed Japanese nationalist and does not particularly enjoy the tourism. So there's just a lot of good fish out of water humor you get to do with Goemon. I think Inoue is just great at those gags. And I do love him as, like, he is Lupin and Jigen's weird buddy who is this walking anachronism, who is like loyal to a fault, but also just a fucking weirdo who will not eat with them and has to go out and find soba noodles. Like, I just kind of love his weird deal. And I think they find a way to use him in a fun, consistent manner in this show. And then, as you say, when you go to Japan, you get to have more fun with him. And, you know, he does get the torture episode, which is a really memorable one, and we'll talk about that. You know, as someone who also is a huge fan of Zenigata, Zenigata is basically co-protagonist in part 2.
Yes.
And Goro Naya is, I just need to shout out, like, he might be my vocal MVP of this show, because even in episodes where I think it feels more formulaic to have Zenigata there, he's just so fucking funny. Like, he is just a walking comedy machine. It is one of the funniest vocal performances I've ever heard. And he's someone who could make me laugh reading the phone book, is just, I think, the truth about Goro Naya's performance as Zenigata.
Yeah, Zenigata is, to me, he's the MVP of the show, because he is he's the one who makes the Saturday morning cartoon-ness of it work. I'm very glad that they didn't give him the dumb catchphrase he had at the end of part 1, where it's like, I'll catch you next week, Lupin, or whatever. He does once in a while, he does break the fourth wall occasionally. There's like a line in one of them where he says, you know, next week I'm going to be the protagonist of my own love story, Lupin.
Yes.
But like, because they only do that joke very occasionally, at least of what we saw, like, some of that works a lot better for me than it did in the second half of part 1. And yeah, it is a thing where occasionally Zenigata feels very shoehorned into the plot, because there are some plots where it's very natural or it's necessary for him to be here. Some of the times you're like, how the fuck did you even worm Zenigata into this? But Goro Naya's like performance of the like just absolutely deranged obsession he has with catching Lupin, like, come hell or high water, no matter what. Like, he'll go to fucking weird, apparently Nazi Germany that still existed in the 1970s or whatever in that one episode, and he'll be there and have an adversarial relationship with like the Nazi captain guy. They'll find a way to get him in there because he's just going to try to capture Lupin. And it is, I think, the glue that makes even the mediocre episodes, they're still like, he's always fun in them, and like his role in the story is always fun and helps kind of center the story. Even when the rest of the episode's not really working for me, the Zenigata stuff is always fun. And it is the thing that I think is like the most vital thing to the engine that keeps the 155 episode train fucking going, is Zenigata is always going to be there. He's always going to have a funny gag. And that just kind of works for you.
Japanimation Station.
Thanks for listening to Japanimation Station. If you're enjoying the show, please remember to like and subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and tell your friends.
You can also find us over at the Purely Academic Podcast, our potentially educational variety show where we talk video games, movies, TV, and more every month. And you can read my movie reviews and follow everything we release together on the Fade to Lack Substack at www.jonathanlack.com.
And now, back to the show.
So let's go ahead, Sean, and transition into talking about all of the fun episodes we watched for part 2. Starting with episode 1. This is one, though. The reason why we have 27 and an odd number is because when I first made the list, I had 26, because that's like a nice 2-core thing. And I was like, oh, we should watch the first episode just to see how they kind of level set. Because there's also a fun thing they kind of do with continuity here. But the first episode, Lupin III's gallant appearance, or the return of Lupin III in English, is an interesting one. The title of the episode, The Gallant Appearance of Lupin III, is the title of the first chapter of the original manga. The plot of this one is inspired by the first chapter of the second manga, which is called Lupin Family Reunion, which is about everybody getting back together, but they can't figure out who invited them. And that manga chapter is just tremendous. It's very funny because the joke in that manga chapter is literally every character in the room is wearing a mask and is actually someone else. They don't do that in this one. What it winds up being is this callback to the first episode of part 1, and there's this whole cruise ship dynamic where they are all invited because Mr. X, the villain from the first episode of part 1, is back. I think the second half of this episode is nothing special, but I do enjoy seeing everybody come together in that first half as just kind of a get the gang together to start the new series kind of thing.
Yeah, it is very funny to see them like throw some vague sense of continuity onto this show, because if you try to interrogate it for any amount of time, all of it falls apart. There's like some sort of 5-year time gap, right, or something that has happened.
What they establish is that the finale of part 1, where they're all swimming in the water and Zenigata is chasing them, is that at that point they went international. They left Japan and they went their separate ways. It's been 5 years and now they're reuniting and kicking their adventures off again, is like the light continuity they've sprinkled onto this. Of course, that was not intended at the end of part 1, and it again makes no sense because just like details like what Lupin the First did change from week to week, so like there really is no continuity, but I like that it's attempted here.
Yeah, and that there are multiple episodes later on that are about like, oh, I did this thing X number of years ago. You're like, this doesn't line up at all with all the shit. I also remember there's something in that first episode where they blatantly ignore within the timeline the fact that during the events of Lupin III Part 1, Lupin spent an entire year in jail. They just kind of forget, because I think they say like, oh, we were like, had our adventures for that year or something. It's like, no, within that year, he spent an entire year in jail in episode 4. So, you know,
just
you
to fuck with Zenigata.
Yes.
Yes.
Still the best thing Lupin has ever done. But yes, I think I was with you that first half is very fun. There's some fun jokes. It's fun to see the gang get back together. And then when it becomes fighting Mr. X, who has like a robot body or whatever the fuck crazy shit happens in the second half of that episode, is kind of whatever. I do remember when I watched that first episode thinking that the character designs didn't work that well for me. And then the character designs slowly start to shift to look more like their part 1 ones. Like in that first couple of episodes we watched, they've got a much more kind of like round design.
Yeah.
That I think gets a little bit too far away from the Monkey Punch look. I think particularly Jigen does not look that good in those early episodes. And then slowly the character designs feel like they go a little bit closer to what you kind of expect them to look like from part 1 and stuff like that. That's one of the notes I made for episode 1 was feeling like the character designs were weird.
I agree with that. I think the animation in general in the second half of what we watched is generally stronger, in part because you have Telecom, you have Topcraft, you have more studios working on it. There is more variance early on. The thing I find funny about particularly early part 2 is that when Lupin is off model, it's that his torso is way too big and his head is small. And that is something you get a lot, is like his red jacket area is weirdly big and his head is weirdly small. You definitely see that in episode 1. That is kind of how it looks when they get him off model. And again, I do think it snaps into place later on, but I agree with you about the character designs early on. My other note about this first episode is that it completely feels like the Dragon Ball Z movie Return of Cooler, where Mr. X has his big new metal body that looks exactly like Metal Cooler, and it made me laugh because we made a bunch of Dragon Ball comparisons last time as well.
Yes, well, you know, I mean, as we know, after the big F1 race or whatever, Mr. X got launched into space, and then he was grabbed by the big Getty star and turned into an android. That's the whole premise of episode 1 here.
All right, episode 12 is the next one we watched, A Gift for the President, or The Slight Before Christmas. There's a pun. And this is the wine episode. They are in, globe trotting. Now we are in Bordeaux, France, where Napoleon got wine for Josephine, and there's a special bottle of aged wine being gifted to the American president. Of course, Goemon refuses to drink wine and will only have the finest Japanese sake, which he does carry around, which is funny. And there you go. And this episode is just a blast. This is definitely one where if episode 1 is a little shaky, then you go to this one and it's like, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite episodes, particularly of like the comedic episodes. Like most of my favorite ones are the ones that are more dramatic, but I think this one just has like it's got a really good energy, it's got a really good pace, and then it's got a fantastic payoff at the end, right? Where the part of the joke is that they steal the like super fancy Napoleonic wine or whatever and replace it with like the cheapest bottle of wine that Lupin could buy, and then they're watching on the television broadcast of the White House with the president and his family going to sit down to have the wine, and then they drink it and everyone's like, oh, they're going to think it's awful swill. And then they're like, oh, this is just exquisite. This is the best wine ever. And then Lupin and gang are like, what? And then they drink their wine, which is still the old Napoleonic wine, but it has gone bad. And so they all spit it out because it is awful. And then he gives, it's also on Christmas is the dinner. So then he gives the dolls that he had stolen, the crate of dolls that he mistakenly stole when he was trying to get the wine, and he gives those back to all the good boys and girls in America. And it's just like, it's an episode with like,
the final image is him dropping all the dolls on parachutes over the White House. It's very funny. It's like Lupin Santa, but he's doing it literally over the White House, which is great.
Yeah, and it's just a very funny episode it's a punchline you see coming, but it's such a kind of classic style punchline. It works so well. And they have just a tremendous amount of fun with the French setting. There's a whole big action sequence in a wine cellar where they break open all the wine barrels and like everyone's drowning in wine and the cops get drunk, which is great. All the fake French that Lupin and Zenigata say is phenomenal. And I love that Lupin has his gobi, which is the thing in the Japanese language that you kind of put at the end of your sentence, like desu. That turns into devu. So he's just speaking Japanese, but at the end of every sentence, he just goes, like, watashi wa Lupin devu. And he just keeps on doing that. And it's some of the hardest I laughed at this whole show was Yasu Yamada just like hamming it the fuck up. And every time he says devu, it feels like he just leans into it harder and harder and harder. And it is very funny.
Yes, it's Yasuo Yamada, we cannot sing the praises of enough. This is where I think part 2, I mentioned this a little bit on Mystery of Mamo, he's fully come into the sing-song version of his Lupin voice, and man, he is just a delight to listen to. Whenever he does his silly laugh, or the kind of stuff you're talking about, his different vocal tics, what a fucking delight.
Yeah, he's just a fucking all-star. And this is one of his funniest performances, I think, is in this episode because he's just hamming it the fuck up with the weird French shit, but it is so funny.
Yeah, this one's great. And while we're on what I'm going to call Jesus Christ Watch of references to Christ in episodes of Lupin III Part 2, I do want to note there's a great moment at the beginning of this one where it is the gang is hanging around drinking their fancy wine and sake and living it up, and then it cuts to Zenigata in his shitty apartment eating a giant baguette, and it's like stale, and he goes, Jesus Christ called this his body. Well, it sure is a hard body to eat. And I love whenever they contrast Lupin and the gang living it up and Zenigata's like sad, impoverished life of global police work. It's fucking great. Anyway, more on Jesus Christ Watch later. Number 13, The Great Chase in San Francisco, or I Left My Mind in San Francisco. I think this is probably one of the more forgettable ones we watched. It really has no like main plot other than Lupin is doing some the thing and Zenigata is going after them, and there is a funny part in the middle where Zenigata is talking to this doctor about being depressed, and the doctor is voiced by Joji Yanami from Dragon Ball. He voices the narrator and Kaio-sama. And gives him this pep talk, and then Zenigata goes on this chase of Lupin. But there never really is kind of a final plot that comes into play. This is definitely one where Zenigata holds the whole thing together.
Yeah, well, I think you're giving this episode a little bit short shrift, because this is the one where it does have a really good premise, which is that NASA has perfected a method of creating like artificial diamonds, and they're like perfect artificial diamonds. And what Lupin is trying to do is infiltrate NASA, not to steal anything, but to destroy how you make these artificial diamonds.
I
Because if
forgot
anyone
about
can
that.
make
Okay.
diamonds, then diamonds are valueless, right? So there's a good first half of the episode that is just them trying to get into NASA. There's a bunch of like good, bad American jokes. Lupin has a cover name, which is Ball McCartney, and Jigen has a cover name, which is Orange Star. And when they have to get into NASA, there's a passcode, and the question for the passcode is, who are the Beatles? And the answer is Presley is number one.
Yes,
and it's a very 70s ass like whole series of like Beatles and like rock and roll references. I think the second half of the episode is where it's mostly just sort of like them running around, and I think they have to chase after Zenigata because he has the thing and he doesn't realize it or something. I forget what happens in the second half.
I think they put it in his tooth. They put this like the
Yes.
microfilm that they're stealing in Zenigata. Okay, you know what? I did give this one the short shrift. It's not perfect, but I think I started watching part 2 a little earlier than you did, Sean, and it's been like 4 weeks since I watched this one. But now that you're saying all of that, I'm remembering this because there's also this whole side of the episode where Zenigata is just like literally clinically depressed in the first half of this episode. Like he's overlooking the ocean in San Francisco and he sees Lupin's ghost and he's like, I'm not going to last much longer. And then he says, across the ocean is Japan. Maybe I should just give up on Lupin. And no, my journey is not over until I capture him. And all of that. And you get this mournful horn music. And I do like Zenigata's journey. I don't know if I think why I maybe forget it is that there is that great heist premise and it never quite connects to what Zenigata is up to other than that they wind up in this chase. But the different halves of it I do enjoy a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is the first episode we've encountered that has what to me is kind of the thing that is like kind of the hallmark of the standard or kind of fairly mediocre feeling Lupin III Part 2 episode thing, which is you've got a good premise, but most of the actual body of the episode are fairly unrelated hijinks. And those individual hijinks can be fun, but it never congeals into something bigger. I think this is one of the ones that particularly because of the setting and because I think that core idea is incredibly funny to me, of Lupin having to destroy how you make artificial diamonds.
Yes.
It's just a great idea. But yeah, it's a bunch of different ideas for an episode they've sort of slammed together and you get some good bits out of it. But in a 22-minute long anime episode, there's not enough space to have 3 or 4 different ideas. There's enough space to have one really good idea that you really double down on. And so the best episodes, like the wine episode, is just a complete, like, we have set up our premise, which is about this wine thing, and everything in the episode is about that. And it's all about getting to that punchline at the end, and it's got such a clear vision for what the core story is and the hook is, and all the jokes and all the hijinks connect really naturally to that core hook, whereas The Great Chase in San Francisco has like 3 or 4 hooks in it, and it just kind of jumps around between them. Each of those hooks is funny. Like, I had forgotten, because I didn't write it in my notes, that of the whole thing, that the reason why they're chasing Zenigata is because Zenigata thinks that Lupin is a hallucination he is having because of his depression. That's like a hilarious idea that should be its own episode, but it gets lost in the fog of all the other shit and the diamonds and NASA and all that's going on and all the American pop culture references that don't really connect to it in any way.
Yeah. But, you know, there are worse ways to spend 20 minutes, that's for sure.
Yes.
Episode 20, Cornered Lupin, or Hell to Pay. Not Hell to Pay, Hell to Pay, as in a wig for a man. Because this...
Not just any man, a wig for fake Hitler.
Fake Hitler. This is your fake Hitler episode where you have the Lupin gang it's Lupin and Fujiko specifically are holed up in this castle in this like fake German fascist state. And and basically Zenigata is with General Hess, who is the like fake, Führer person who has come in and is trying to capture Lupin. Zenigata is trying to get them to do it non-lethally, but this is about them trying to get out of this situation where they've pissed off the entire country. But basically, the entire episode is an extended homage to Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator, which is the reason why I picked this one. I heard someone say that when I was looking through different episode options, and I'm like, I have to see this, because their whole thing with the General Hess character, with like General Hess is different. General Hess is the guy chasing them. Then there is the Führer character, who is this fat little short guy guy with a little mustache and shitty blonde wig. Looks a lot like Trump, I have to say. And they do all the great dictator stuff, like he's playing with an inflatable globe, and you have all of those jokes. You have a flashback where he's doing the crazy, like, nonsense German speak, which is also very much taken from The Great Dictator. And this is a very fun one. It's extremely silly. The whole thing you learn about why they are after Lupin is because he was trying to steal the medallion on the Fuhrer's chest and instead accidentally ripped his toupee off. And so the whole country saw he was bald, and now he wants to kill Lupin. It's pretty good.
Yeah, this is a very fun episode. This is the first one of the ones we watched that has it feels a bit more dramatic, even though it's got that silly stuff. Like the whole, like, very, like, Assault on Precinct 13-esque standoff where they're like, we're holed up in this castle, and all these Nazis keep on getting in every which way, and Lupin and Fujiko are very desperate to fight them all off, while on the outside, Jigen and Goemon are trying to sort of find a way to get them out. It's a legitimately really kind of tense episode for a lot of that stuff. But then it does have your good comedy interludes where they do the inflatable globe, or the inflatable globe scene with the dictator character. They do the flashback where you find out why they're in there, which is them actually fishing off his fucking toupee, which is also where you learn why the episode in English is called Hell Toupee, and you get another good laugh because the English title is fucking great. And then I like the resolution of the episode is that the classic Lupin III escape, which happens in maybe about a third of the episodes we've watched, which is him getting away on a hot air balloon, is just kind of like his default he goes for, I guess. But the hot air balloon in this one has the Fuhrer's face painted on it, and so none of them can shoot it because it would be disrespecting the Fuhrer, so they just have to let them float away gently. I think that's a good bit.
That's a great use of Goemon, because it's his idea. They're getting the balloon, and he's like, wait, Jigen, I have an idea. And he gets out, because he's a crazy Japanese man, he has his calligraphy pens ready, and he's painting. The character's name is Hutler, by the way. It's not just the Fuhrer. They named him Hutler, which is great. Yeah, no, and it is tense. Like, there's this really, because it's Lupin and Fujiko. This is a good use of Fujiko, I think.
Yes.
Of in the castle together, having to kind of lean on each other. And there's this very melancholic tone as they become hopeless and think they're going to die, and Lupin only has one bullet left in his Walther and is thinking about, like, does he kill, like, Fujiko is asking him to, like, kill her with his last bullet so she doesn't have to, like, see this. And it's like, it's a really good scene. And then you also have some great comedy. You have this scene where Jigen and Goemon are digging underground in their first attempt to reach the castle, and Kiyoshi Kobayashi throws off this great deadpan, damn, I should have been born a mole, which is a great line. There's a lot of stuff like that. There's a lot of Lupin and Fujiko just killing Nazis, which is fun. Yep. There's this whole part where he's throwing Nazis out the window and counting in German, which is a great moment for Yasuo Yamada to do his funny accents. It's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and this is a rare episode of Lupin III where it makes sense why the random, like, submachine guns that the enemies always have in these episodes, why they're always fucking MP40s, the Nazi World War II era submachine gun. That was true in part 1. It's true of most episodes in part 2. I have no idea why everybody in Japan and around the world are fucking toting Nazi submachine guns, but it's just the guns they always have. But this time, they're actually fake Nazis. So I'm like, yes, it makes sense why they all have MP40s, because the MP40 is just such a distinctive looking gun that it's very easy to tell, even if it's badly drawn, that that's what they're trying to draw. And I was just always very confused by it. Here, it makes perfect sense. This is also the episode where Zenigata gets to be working opposite the Nazi general guy, and that is very fun. Where Zenigata is, like, very desperate to take Lupin alive, and the Nazi dude just wants to kill him. And it's just, you get to see it's like a more dramatic side of Zenigata, where he's having to bargain with this guy and, like, talking about the international relations between fake Nazi Germany and Japan. A thing that they don't dig too deep into the actual historical shit that there's a side to that there, which, you know, is not unexpected, but it is, you know, something to note there. But it does give Zenigata kind of a different valence to play. That he has some more dramatic stuff in later episodes, but it's very different than I think you really saw him used too much in part 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And the actor who plays General Hess is also very funny and good here, Junpei Takiguchi, and he and Goro Naya have a lot of good exchanges in this one. So It's a good episode. All right, episode 21, Goemon's Revenge, or The Last Mastery, which is in Japan. As you said, we're in Japan, so it's going to be a Goemon episode. This is a story where his master has been killed, and he vows revenge. The guy who killed his master was another student named Jinkuro, and Jinkuro knows that Goemon is going to come after him, so he basically turns himself over to Zenigata, and Goemon has to enlist Lupin's help to get Jinkuro off, so he will be let out of prison so Goemon could kill him, which I think is a fucking killer premise, and there's some really good stuff in this one.
I think it's a decent premise. I think this, for me, was an example of what I was saying earlier, though, where it didn't connect very naturally to me with the, ninja samurai fight, and it just felt like, okay, we're going to spend the middle of this episode in, a weird fake courtroom drama.
That's fair, yeah.
I didn't really connect to this episode super strong. I thought the fight at the end was fun, but it just kind of felt like you took two different ideas for an episode. One is Goemon's master has been killed and Goemon has to get revenge, and one is we have to have a courtroom drama about who killed this character. And you're just sort of smashing them together. It was a bit too many cooks in the kitchen sort of thing.
I think that's fair. I like the idea in so much as I think it's interesting that this character is so scared of Goemon that he willingly turns himself in, and then Lupin is the one who comes in to help there. But yeah, the final duel is fun because the way he kills him is he throws his sword into the sky as lightning strikes, and it conducts just lights Jinkuro on fire, which is a killer climax. At the very least, this episode is worth it for that. But
wait, no, that's not this episode. That's a later episode where you've got some enemies that the only way you could kill them is you need to set them on fire.
That's true.
I think you're misremembering where that pops up.
No. This happens here too. I have it in my notes.
Does he do that in 2 episodes?
Yeah, he must, because he does it in this one.
Okay, because he definitely does that in a certain vampire episode. Is how that episode resolves. So I didn't write down how this fight ends. So I'll trust your notes.
I have 40 solid pages of notes here, Sean. I went crazy.
Okay, that must be an idea they did twice, huh?
Yeah. 25, episode 25, an episode I chose for its title, Encounter with the Deadly Iron Lizard, or The Lair of the Land Shark. They're not land sharks, they're deadly iron lizards. Get it right, English dub. Come on. But this is one where
they're kind of neither, really.
They're kind of neither. Yes. This is a silly episode. This is an episode set in Africa. They rob the Bank of Africa. It's Africa spelled with an L. I just, sometimes that happens in Japanese media. They rob the Bank of Africa because they are trying to help Fujiko, who has been imprisoned in this crazy prison where there are no cells or doors or anything, but every prisoner's DNA has been given to this crazy little bomb machine. It's this goofy little lizard robot that when they have the DNA, and if the prisoner goes too far from the prison, it will come after them and blow the fuck up. And so Jigen, Goemon, and Lupin get themselves imprisoned in the prison to help Fujiko out. And then most of the episode is a big chase sequence with them trying to outrun the deadly iron lizards. There's some good mayhem in it. My main issue with this episode is that it starts out as this thing about Fujiko, and then they ignore her and just leave her in prison for the entire chase half of it, which I think is a little weird. But I will say, one thing I mentioned a lot in my notes is that this series has absolutely glorious, what I call 70s anime explosions, which is something I also love in Mobile Suit Gundam and a lot of other 70s and early 80s anime, is the way explosions are drawn as just these basically avant-garde messes of colors on screen, frames that look very much like, this is a very avant-garde connection for me, but like Stan Brackage's movies where he would paint on the cells and make these crazy images. And I just love how 70s anime explosions look, and because of the Deadly Iron Lizards, you do get a lot of those here. Otherwise, I think this is an episode that has its moments, but maybe doesn't fully come together.
Yeah, I think this is probably the worst episode we watched to me. I just think it's kind of like a nothing episode where, one, the premise is dumb. It is because you said it was the DNA. It's not even DNA. It's that they because you think it's DNA because it's like they pull the hair out, but it's the smell because they smell your hair and they get your smell. And so it's just immediately the premise is like, well, this just doesn't seem like it should be formidable in any way. This should be, because it's like well, prisons already have a thing that do this. They're called fucking dogs, you know? Like, and you have seen that in a million movies of the prisoners trying to escape and trying to escape dogs that are chasing them from their smell. It's just these happen to be deadly iron lizards that are basically cybermats from Doctor Who that chase after your smell and explode when they hit you. But like, it's just like the whole episode becomes, to me, a kind of very average sort of Tom and Jerry cartoon-esque, like, we're seeing Lupin and Goemon and Jigen run around trying to escape the lizards. They're the remote-controlled cars, basically, and then they just keep chasing them. But it's like, what if you did a Wile E. Coyote or a Tom and Jerry thing, but one half of the pair were just completely autonomous, non-characterized objects? And so it's like, it takes the whole fun out of the chase. You know, like, it would be fun if it was like Zenigata was chasing them or some other character was chasing them. But I think having it be like a robot and spending literally like 10 minutes on the chase, it's the whole half of the episode is that. I found it very boring.
That is totally fair. I think I generally probably agree that this is probably the worst one. And I did make sure just to like pick a couple by the name just in case, because I didn't just want to pick like the greatest hits episodes, right? Because I wanted a more representative sample. And this definitely felt like we need to get an episode out this week kind of episode, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, this felt like this was like, if there was a writer's strike going on, this is the episode that gets made, is what it felt like. It was like an episode that felt like it was made by only animators and that's it. Because all it is like a big chase. And that's like the whole episode.
All right. Next episode is the first of several Jigen-centric ones we watched, and one of my favorites. Episode 26, A Rose and a Pistol, or Shot Through the Heart. Of course, they were going to do one called that. Yeah. But this is the episode in Madrid, in Spain. There are a bunch of good things going on in this one, but the main thing is that Jigen winds up with this flamenco dancer who he is with for much of the episode, trying to help her escape, and then eventually realizing that I think that she double crosses them at the end. But there is a bunch of good stuff in this one. It is all scored to classical music, not the normal Yuji Ono score, which is very memorable. They do a couple like this, where they use different... There's a later Jigen one that is scored to Swan Lake. That is the one we both really love that we mentioned earlier, the Tomino one. The animations in Spain are fantastic. You have Zenigata's whole thing in this episode is that he has done all this training with different sized handcuffs, and so he's throwing like just a bajillion handcuffs at them at all times, including one for like every knuckle on every finger, and that is how he plays into it. But this one, just it's got everything kind of you want out of part two, which is sort of that sense of place in the global location. It's got interesting guest characters. It's got a good use of the cast, and then this focus on Jigen, who basically anytime you shine the spotlight on Jigen, you're going to get good stuff.
Yeah, it's very good. I think, like, in retrospect, compared to some of the later Jigen-focused episodes we have, this is probably the weakest of the Jigen episodes, but the weakest of the Jigen episodes is still near the top of the pile for the overall list of episodes we watched, because, this one is very good. You've just got that sort of, a classic kind of setup, which is that Lupin and Jigen have to fight each other because they've been tricked, right? That's part of it. So you have that scene in the middle where they have a duel, but they figure out that they've both been tricked by the flamenco lady, because I think it's Lupin like throws out a coin and they both are like shooting at the coin. And so they know that it has to be the real Jigen and real Lupin because they were both told that the other one's in disguise. But only the real ones could shoot that accurately. And so they both come up with that premise. They're like, they have some sort of plan where they shoot each other with like bullets with fake blood on them or something so that they fake their own deaths and are able to go after the bad guys. Like, that's a really good twist and sequence of that kind of the heart of this episode.
I love the moment with the coin because he throws it and they both nail it, and so they know it must be the real one, and then they are able to kind of work it out. And you have the Linda character is the flamenco dancer who is your femme fatale here. I agree there are better Jigen episodes to come, but like of the ones we've watched so far, this was my favorite. And I just started to realize, like, oh, I can't wait for the next Jigen episode too, because these seem good. And Jigen is just someone you can put into like your kind of film noir or Casablanca scenario, and he will work so well in that setting. He would have been played by Humphrey Bogart in a Hollywood movie, right? And he's just so good at that.
Yeah, I think one note I made about this, I think this is one of the reasons why I say it for me, it's like on the weaker end, is that I loved the joke with Zenigata and the handcuffs, But the way the episode ends is that it wraps back around to that, and it's a big, like, goofy chase with Zenigata throwing the handcuffs at them. And I remember feeling at the time, and I wrote this down in my notes, that, like, it kind of felt like it undercut the more dramatic tone the episode had compared to the others. And I said, like, wrote in my notes that I wish the episode had the confidence that part one had early on to just let the episode go out on a very dramatic moment rather than having a dramatic moment and then having a final minute or two that goes back to the comic stuff with Zenigata. And that's something that the show either, I can't say definitively it's something that the show developed later on, or if it's just like happens to be the episodes that we saw. But the later versions of this kind of story we have with Jigen have the confidence to say, we hit the big dramatic moment at the end and let's just hang there and end the episode. And I think that's like a much better way to do it, rather than having it end on the comic moment. You use the comic moments throughout the middle to break up the drama, but not as like the thing that you go out on. That's like probably my biggest criticism of this one.
I would agree with that, and I think this is something else I thought the show got better at least in the episodes we watched, is when they don't quite know what to do with a character. I think it was more obvious in the early episodes. Like Zenigata, just probably, I like the idea. It's too outsized a Zenigata role for what this story is, and I think they are better at, like, they have to have all five in every episode. That's like very clearly the mandate of this show. I think they get better at, like, because the later Jigen episodes also will have Zenigata, but I think they will have modulated it to the right position where it doesn't feel like a distraction. So yeah. Number 27, a really interesting one. Where did the Cinderella stamp go? Or the Little Princess of Darkness? I like just the English title goes for it, because this is a really silly one. Whereas there's this special stamp. It's one of 12 handmade stamps that Grace Kelly, Queen of Monaco, is said to have owned. And it's the Cinderella stamp, and it's said that if the owner becomes a princess, the watermark of the glass slipper will disappear. So there is a little girl who walked straight out of an episode of World Masterpiece Theater. She could have been Heidi Girl of the Alps. She could have been Anna Green Gables, but she is now here on Lupin III, and she wants that stamp. And she is a thorn in Lupin and Jigen's side through the whole episode. She becomes their accomplice as they have to go around, and it is basically like, what if Lupin III just ran pell-mell into an episode of World Masterpiece Theater and did that for an episode? And it's I love this one. This one's very cool.
I think this is a great episode. I think this is a good example of where, like, the episode has a good, strong central premise, and it fucking sticks with it for the whole way through. And yeah, it's great. I love how mismatched the Alice, the little girl, her character design is. She just doesn't look like a character from the show ever at any point, and it's great. She looks like little, like, Pippi Longstocking, basically. It's fucking phenomenal. And I love, like, the voice for the character in the writing, where she just, like, is very easily able to get one up on Lupin all throughout. And Lupin, it puts Lupin in a fun position where, the normal mode of the show is that Lupin is one step ahead of everybody else. And you might think at one point that he's not, but really he is. That's what most of the episodes are like, because he's usually having to, like, be a successful thief or a mostly successful thief. Whereas here, he's the underdog. Like, he's constantly trying to get one up, but then this weird little girl is always 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of him. And it's fucking great. There's a whole big crazy dream sequence near the end of the episode that goes full Alice in Wonderland, where they're at the amusement park, and it just goes kind of like weird and almost pseudo psychedelic. That I thought was just phenomenal, and it, like, the backgrounds become sort of like children's drawings done in, like, colored pencil and stuff like that. It's just a big, like, aesthetic swing the episode takes for an episode that you wouldn't think would go that far. Like, this on the tin looks like it's just like your stock standard, we couldn't come up with a great idea, so this is like a out of the box of cliches style plot. Let's have the precocious child character, guest character, come in for this episode and fuck around, and it's funny because it's a little kid. It's a thing you have seen. If you have watched any weekly cartoon, you have seen this kind of episode. But I think what sets it apart is that this one just goes so hard, and it feels like they really committed to fully executing on that premise. And that's when you so get that at the end sequence, where they totally change the whole look of the show, in order to kind of, like, get you into the mindset of this kid and to see the world through her eyes and to get this whole weird sort of fantasy sequence.
Oh yeah, it's an absolute aesthetic standout. That final chase in the amusement park with the child's drawing backgrounds, it all becomes abstract and silly. Like they're on this Dumbo style ride at one point, and then the elephants start flying. You have a toy horse, and then like it becomes a pumpkin ride, like Cinderella. A lot of Disney references. It's really cool. Like honestly, it does a lot of stuff that I think you wouldn't get away with today because you'd be too afraid of Disney litigation. Like full on, they do the thing like from Alice in Wonderland with the cards that come to life and have the spears. All of that's cool. But even before you get to that point, it's just absolutely delightful because of how like Goemon and Fujiko show up here and there, but mostly it's Lupin, Jigen, and the little girl, Alice. And just they are so at a loss of how to deal with this kid. Like at one point she's like, if you get me enough money, I'll give you the stamp. So Lupin and Jigen stop at the Kansas City Bank. And they just full on do a normal, like, go in with masks on and do an armed bank robbery. And Zenigata is like, there's no way Lupin would do this. It can't be him, because Zenigata's like, that is not his MO. And the kidnapping, which is not really a kidnapping, but Zenigata's like very confused because he's like, why is Lupin involved in all this? And that alone, even if you didn't get to the abstract stuff at the end, I think this episode would be a highlight. And then when you do get that, this is an all-timer.
Yeah, because there's so many good gags because I had forgotten about this one, but yes, that the whole bank heist, which is also just sort of randomly some like old West 19th century bank too. So it's just like it's got like saloon doors on it and shit, which is amazing. But the whole thing is that Lupin says, "Hey, look, I'll just buy it off of you." And she says, "Okay, if you can give me enough money, I'll let you buy it off of me." And then he goes, gets the money, he buys it from her, and then she says, "Oh, well, here, I'll give you this money for that for the stamp." And he's like, what? And it's like, well, this is how much money you're saying the stamp is worth, so I'll give you this much money for the stamp. And it's just like, it's so logical. And he's just like, fuck this, just fucking little kid. It's great. And then, of course, the resolution of the episode, kind of like the French one. I think it's a resolution or kind of a punchline you can see coming, but it's so good, which is she wins in the end because she mails herself the stamp. It's so fucking good. It's just such a classic ending of that's how she gets it and gets away at the end. Because what do you use a stamp for? You mail it. So she mails herself the stamp.
And Lupin, he did leave a note on it because he could have stopped it, but he leaves this note and says he'll come get it back when she no longer needs to be a princess. And so I wrote in my notes, Sean, Lupin really is a nice guy here. Because in part one, we had the Lupin is a nice man song. He's not usually a nice man in part one. He's a very nice man here. This is also one of my favorite uses of kind of the romantic, chivalric hero Lupin, which he isn't... It's silly, but like he does kind of have that because he is good with the little girl. Like he's nice to her and is like... Because she has a similar anarchic spirit to him. Like they are kind of two peas in a pod. And I think it's a good use of that.
Yeah, very fun episode.
Yeah. Number 30, The Wind in Morocco is Hot, or Morocco Horror Picture Show. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, man. What's this one about? I have to admit, just right off the bat, I don't remember, so I'm looking through my notes.
I will read you my one-sentence note on this one. Fun hijinks episode about Lupin and Pops having to team up to escape a revolutionary Moroccan Foreign Legion.
That's the one this one is, yes. Okay. I don't hate... This is a totally fine episode. It is this one where, Lupin and Zenigata get thrown in. They're in this, like, Moroccan... there's like a military leadership and they throw them in prison and they're having to work for the evil military government and they have to work together to get away. And I think it is exactly what you said. It is fun hijinks. There's nothing particularly necessarily special about it, but I do like that. There's a moment where Zenigata is falling off the train and Lupin is like, hang on, To-chan! And it's a great Yasuo Yamada moment. Decouples the car to go back for Zenigata, and they have their camaraderie and all of that. All of that stuff is fun, but yeah.
Yeah, it's an episode that exists purely to have some scenes where Lupin and Zenigata are on the same side. Like, it feels like they came up with a bunch of scenes and jokes about them having to be like, it's the classic, they're like handcuffed together or whatever. So it's a very, very cliche setup, but it's kind of a classic setup and it works well. But it's just that kind of episode where it's only, even at its best, it's probably only ever going to be a middling episode because its premise is to get some jokes across. They don't have like a very strong story to tell. Like you don't learn anything new about Lupin and Pops in the episode or anything. Right. There's no big dramatic core revelation or character development or anything like that. It's just... It is funny to see these two characters who are foes having to sort of work together to escape. And that's just the whole episode.
But this is also where Lupin has a one-up over maybe some other shows that have to do the episodic middling thing, because when you're doing that, in Lupin, you have Goro Naya and Yasuo Yamada paired up for the whole episode. So, like, there is also, I think, a floor of how entertaining it's going to be, and that floor is pretty high when that's your basic, what you have on hand, you know?
Yeah, that's why in my notes I said fun hijinks episode and not middling hijinks episode, which is what the note would normally be.
Indeed. All right, number 32, this is a good one. Lupin dies twice, or Lupin the Interred, which is one where Lupin has... Lupin the Interred.
The Interred. Like, they should have just... and for the English one, they should have redone the theme song that just said that.
Yes.
It's so good.
Oh, man. But yes, this is one where he has... there's a couple of episodes with this general premise, and they're usually pretty good, where there is a high-powered assassin on the trail of Lupin III. You also got this in part 1 sometimes. The assassin is named Puma. He's got a big, crazy six-shooter. Is this the one where he's got the crazy gun, or is... No, that's a later one.
No, that's the later one. We'll talk about that one.
Yes.
That one's fucking weird.
That one's also good. But this one, Puma... is out to kill Lupin, and Lupin allows himself to seemingly die to get one up on him, but he doesn't fill anyone else in on the plan other than, I think, Fujiko. So you have Zenigata, Goemon, and Jigen for the middle part of this episode really thinking Lupin is dead, and all of their, like, emotions that come out, like, they play it very straight for part of it. Like when the mortician comes out with the coffin and Jigen and Goemon are both overcome and they run out, and Jigen is just shooting the lampposts while tears are streaming down his face, and Goemon is cutting down palm trees because this one happens in Miami. Zenigata is like, he has to see the body because he thinks it must be a trick. And at the funeral he goes, "You were my reason to live, you were my dearest friend." And then Zenigata also goes after Puma. All of that is just fantastic.
It's great. It just really commits to that part of the premise, which is really good. And then this is also the one we referenced earlier with, there's a couple of scenes that are very similar to some of the stuff near the end of Seijun Suzuki's Branded to Kill, where a part of that whole story for that movie is about assassins. And like the number one assassin, which is just like this ridiculous hitman guy who, like, half of his dialogue is like spoken off screen and shit. Is just like this very sort of almost spectral presence in that movie, and kind of very absurd presence in that movie, particularly at the end. And there's a scene at the lighthouse in this episode that is very similar to that, in like the way that character, that Puma, is written, the way the dialogue is delivered, these sort of almost supernatural presence it feels like he has, being able to speak from nowhere, and the setting is all very similar, and it's like, it feels like a good sort of callback to this fucking crazy movie, that again is the movie that got Seijun Suzuki fucking blacklisted from Japanese filmmaking. So it's fun to see it here. But yeah, it's just got it kind of like that movie. This episode has this really fun tone where it is dramatic. It is definitely dramatic, but it is also ridiculous. And so like it's so obvious, you as an audience member obviously understand that Lupin is not dead and that he has faked his death because you have seen a TV show before, and you know that there's another episode. But it so fully commits to the premise that it gets to kind of explore all the emotions with it. It's just really well done.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's funny in the kind of heightened nature of it, but the episode doesn't necessarily have jokes in that sense. It plays it all very straight down to, this is the rare episode, especially for the early period of the show, that does not end on any kind of gag. It ends on Lupin going out to sea to blow Puma the fuck up on his yacht, and we end on the explosion. It's bad. It's like it's hardcore. And there's a lot of like, that is the general tone of this one, is it is kind of intense and to the point, and like Jigen and Goemon and Zenigata just fully believe that their friend/frenemy is dead, and they have to deal with this. Of course, they're also very mad when they learn Lupin, who is a really shitty friend in this episode, I have to say, is actually alive. But I think all of that, it's done extremely well. And there's some very moody, and I mean, this... one thing I love about part 2 is all the different locations they do in the animation, and they're very imaginative, like where they bury Lupin, and like the like dirt, like kind of cemetery he's in that he comes out of, where he pops out of the coffin with a flower for Fujiko, and all of that stuff. It's this is a definite standout.
Yeah, this is a very good one.
Yeah. Speaking of standouts, Sean?
Yes,
Sean?
their episodes can stand out in a variety of ways, and the most standout episode, Jonathan, is episode 34, Lupin Who Turned Into a Vampire, or the best title in the history of anything ever when you understand what it's referring to, which is But Your Brother Was Such a Nice Guy.
That one, Mike, that full on, the English title is better. They fucking nailed it. Oh my God, because Sean, let me attempt to describe this one. This is an episode. You remember, Sean, I told you in part 1 when we got to the time travel episode, I said, Sean, here's the thing about Lupin III is sometimes it just loses its goddamn mind and does something crazy. This is the kind of thing I think I was mentioning, right? Because this is an episode that has full-on vampires in it. It does not have people pretending to be vampires. It does not. It's just full. It's like the time travel one. Vampires, just you now have to accept they exist in the canon of Lupin III, and that happens. But it's not just that it's vampires. You get all your vampirism, and that is a part of this. But it is about a vampire lady who was revived out of her coffin from 2,000 years ago with a gold statue of the Virgin Mary. And she does not have that gold statue of the Virgin Mary from 2,000 years ago by happenstance. She has it because she is a vampire named Camilla, who was the identical, or not, fraternal twin brother or twin sister of Jesus Christ. She was born from the same womb as Jesus, and that is the plot of the episode. And I'm only scratching the surface of the craziness of that description. This episode is my shit. Oh my God.
Yes, this is the first sentence I wrote in my notes for this episode was, this episode honestly isn't actually particularly good, but it is so much weirder than you would think a Vampire Lupin episode would be, which is fucking saying something. Because a Vampire Lupin episode is already ridiculous, right? It's already, you've gone into the realm of fantasy, which is too far than you would normally go for Lupin. But then it wraps in all this fucking insane Jesus Christ stuff that made me I went down a whole weird rabbit hole trying to figure out some shit about this episode, that there's some fucking crazy shit going on here. And then there's also just a bunch of other random weird stuff. Like, the way that Fujiko enters this episode is the most inexplicable,
we have to talk about it,
madness you've ever encountered. It's just like, top to down, this episode is so bizarre. Also because the whole episode is supposed to take place in Japan for no reason at all. Well, I guess there is a reason, but the reason is insane. But the whole episode looks like it is, like, you know, shot on the back lot of like a 1930s Universal Movie Studios lot with like Dracula and Frankenstein. Like, it's trying to look like that style. But it's supposed to be in Japan. You're like, what is happening? I didn't realize there were Gothic castles and shit all dotting Japan. This episode is unhinged, and it is either the greatest or the worst episode of anything ever. I don't know what it is. It's just, it's upsetting and enlightening, and it is all kinds of things. This is an episode there I toyed with Jonathan recommending that we just do this as its own podcast. It's just episode 34 is its own fucking episode because it is so insane.
It is truly insane, because the whole first half is about the Camilla character and them trying to get the gold Virgin Mary statue, and that she has... Camilla has this mysterious wolf who helps her out. She's got this, horse-drawn carriage, but it has no driver. All these, like, universal horror things. And Camilla winds up seducing Lupin and biting his neck and seemingly turning him into a vampire. The act break to Eyecatch is Lupin turning around with this really goofy vampire costume on with a top hat and cape and revealing that he has fangs now. There's this very funny moment where Jigen is like, "You're right, poor guy, he's turned into a vampire. Amen," and puts his hands together and like bows his head. It's all of that is silly enough. And then, because Lupin is a vampire now, Jigen and Goemon go to Hebrew Village, Japan, which is where the coffin was found, and they find a singing dude named Presley, who is in this like Elvis getup, who is singing about how Jesus Christ died in this village, in Hebrew Village, Japan, and is buried here. But wait, Presley the singer is actually Fujiko for reasons that are never expounded upon.
Yes, this is one of those things where there is I don't remember what the song is off the top of my head. This is one of the rabbit holes I went down to try to figure out what the fucking fuck was with this. There is some sort of weird song, like a novelty song that came out in Japan around this time that is about, it's like, I'm the country Presley, like Ore wa Inaka no Presley. And I think that's what this is a reference to. Even then, it seems fucking insane. Like, I like kind of understood, okay, this is the song that this is referencing, but why has Fujiko disguised herself? And also, how has she disguised herself as like a little man? Like, because it's like a little cartoon man. Like, he looks like Yosemite Sam sized or some crazy shit. And then just takes off the mask and it's Fujiko's head. And then I think it like cuts and it cuts back and she's taking off the rest of the costume. You're like, how did you fit? How did you physically fit into a 3-foot tall little cartoon man costume? And why did you do this? How do you know any of this? Why are you injected yourself into the plot, Fujiko? How does this connect to fucking anything? Are you a big fan of this weird novelty folk song from 1960s Japan? Like, all that is crazy. But this is where you get the story that is in the world of Lupin III. Mary, when she gave birth to Jesus.
I have the quotes. Do you want me to just read Camilla's description, her flashback?
Yes, go ahead.
2,000 years ago, this is also, I should say, illustrated. I have this in the photo gallery, Sean, with like these faux, like painted drawings of the history, which is just extra funny. But this is 2,000 years ago on the night of a shooting star in a humble stall at the edge of a Jewish town, Bethlehem. My mother Mary delivered twins, Jesus Christ and Camilla. Is she Camilla Christ? Does she also get the last name? I don't know.
Who knows?
I was a fanged vampire from birth. My father Joseph was afraid and secretly abandoned me in a mountain cave. I was raised by a wolf and bats. Years later, I stole this gold statue of the Virgin Mary, from a church in Bethlehem because Christ cherished it deeply. I escaped from Christ, crossed the ocean, and moved to Hebrew Village, where I built the casket for artificial hibernation. Then I began my sleep, clutching Mary's statue. Lupin asks, what happened to Christ? Karma is mysterious. Christ followed me to Japan and died in this Hebrew village. Oh my God. Sean. Yeah. Oh my God. This exists. This is the greatest thing ever.
It is staring into the face of madness. And so this is where I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Jonathan, did you Google around about any of this stuff and research this at all?
I just assumed they were fucking high as shit. No, I didn't. I didn't even think to.
So this is like an obscure folk legend in Japan. Part of this is based on an actual thing. None of the vampire shit, none of that. That's all just made up. Also, like a side note on the vampire shit, I have no idea why every English source calls her Camilla and not Carmilla. It's so obviously supposed to be Carmilla, which is the title vampire of one of the oldest Gothic horror novels ever, Carmilla,
right?
By Sheridan LeFaux. I have no idea why the fuck everyone calls her Camilla. The Crunchyroll subs that I have did it. Your subs, which are a different source, did it. Like online, everyone calls her Camilla in English. But the way that they write it in Japanese is the same way you would write Carmilla. It is supposed to fucking be Carmilla. It pisses me off. Anyways, that's irrelevant. This whole Jesus thing. So there is a little village in Japan, the Shingo village in Japan, which I'm just reading here from a Wikipedia page. This is at the bottom of the Wikipedia page for the Tomb of Jesus. Shingo Village in Japan contains another location of what is purported to be the last resting place of Jesus, the so-called Tomb of Jesus, or Kiristo no Haka, the grave of Jesus, and the residence of Jesus' last descendants, the family of Sajiro Sawaguchi. According to the Sawaguchi family's claims, Jesus Christ did not die on the cross at Golgotha. Instead, here's where you get some shit that is different from what you hear here. Instead, his brother Isukiri took his place on the cross while Jesus fled across Siberia to Mutsu province in northern Japan. Once in Japan, he changed his name to Torai Tora Daidenku, became a rice farmer, married a 20-year-old Japanese woman named Miyuko, and raised 3 daughters near what is now Shingo. while in Japan it is asserted that he traveled, learned, and eventually died at the age of 106. His body was exposed on a hilltop for 4 years. According to the customs of the time, Jesus' bones were collected, bundled, and buried in the mound purported to be the grave of Jesus Christ. So this episode is referencing this weird, obscure piece of Japanese Christian folklore, which is that Jesus did not die in the crucifixion. He escaped, came to 2,000-year-old ancient Japan, which that's like ancient Japan, fucking ancient Japan. That's like the only shit we know about Japan from 2,000 years ago is like what is recorded in Chinese history as they traded with ancient Japan. Like that's so long ago. And that he went there and he died there. And so they are sort of taking some of those elements, infusing it with this weird vampire plot where instead of having a mysterious brother, apparently Jesus has a mysterious sister who is also a vampire. That also there is a gold statue of Mary that was made during Jesus's lifetime that Jesus treasured, which is all kinds of madness because it's like Mary became a big thing later. Like it wasn't, Jesus was fucking executed. He wasn't like the most popular dude in the world who getting gold statues made of his fucking mom while a guy was alive. That's a later thing. And also it's a bit uncharacteristic for Jesus to be like holding on to this pure gold statue is not exactly like the most Christian values thing I've ever heard in my life. It's a little bit more Catholic churchy, honestly. But it's fucking like, it took me a while to sort of try to wrap my head around what the fuck is going on here. This is all madness, Jonathan. This is insanity.
So, okay, you're blowing my mind, Sean. I
Yes.
had no idea about the Japanese folklore of Jesus dying in Japan. Now that I've heard that story, I am choosing to believe it, and I am going to this is going to be my new personality trait. I'm going to be the weird person who brings this up in conversation. Did you know Jesus actually died in Japan, and his name was, what was it? Torai
Daitenku.
Torai Daigendenku. I'm gonna become this guy. I'm gonna get a bumper sticker. I fucking love this story. The fact that Lupin III took that and then said, but it's not crazy enough. What if this involved a girl born a vampire who was raised by wolves, who, by the way, when Carmilla in the second half of the episode states her intentions, she says, I will have revenge against Jesus Christ and my mother Mary. And I'm writing in my notes, wow, 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 wow. Now that's what I call something you would never see in an American cartoon. Yes. I will have revenge against Jesus and Mary. By God, there is little I love more than seeing weird representations of Christianity and Western culture in anime, but this takes the cake. This takes it to a whole other level. It's fucking wild. In the middle of all this, you have her having a fucking monster mash in her castle where she's got all her vampire family coming out and all these universal monsters. Goemon saves the day by tying a stick onto his sword to turn it into a cross and throw it to Carmilla, where it then gets hit by lightning and burns them all to death.
Yes.
Fucking hell. There's an earlier scene where they're all making strings of garlic and crosses together, and Goemon is grumpy and says, my family religion has been Shinto for generations.
It's the best joke in the whole show.
Yes. He's grumpy about dealing with these crazy Christians. The episode ends with them returning the Mary statue to the church. Zenigata, dejected, comes in and gets down on his knees and prays to Jesus. And Lupin throws his voice to say, ask and you shall receive, and gives him the statue back and then tells him to go somewhere else, which is just a glorious moment of Lupin fucking with Zenigata. Sean, is this episode good? Is it bad? I have no idea. All I know is it is an incredible piece of fiction.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many deep and incisive questions that are raised by the nature of the plot, of both the plot of this episode and the weird obscure myth that it is based on in Japan. So one thing that's nice about the myth is that it does explain a thing that the episode didn't, that drove me crazy. I mean, it's why I was like, there must be something here. So I Googled around about it to try to figure out what the fuck is going on. Which is it didn't explain what happened with the fucking crucifixion. Because it just says oh, he didn't die and he followed me to ancient Japan somehow. It's I don't even know how he knew that she went to ancient Japan and that shit. But it's well, what about the one thing everybody knows about Jesus. If you know one thing about Jesus Christ, and this is like, fairly well supported historically, the dude was crucified. Like, whatever you think about the more magical parts of the story, the guy was fucking crucified. So you can accept that. It's the one thing you know. It's sort of like the most critical thing that, like, I defines Christianity as a religion and like separates it and makes it its unique thing is all revolved around the life and then the death of Jesus Christ. And then if you want to go the extra mile, the resurrection, right? That's like the linchpin of the Christian faith. So just saying like, oh no, he didn't get crucified, he just came over here, was just like, that's fucking crazy. But I love that. So the episode doesn't explain it, but the myth, the idea of Jesus had a secret brother named Isukiri, which absolutely sounds like a name that would have been around in Jesus Christ's time, and does not in any way sound like some Japanese dude took the Japanese pronunciation of Jesus Christ, which is Iesu Christo, and just mashed it together to make Isukiri. That doesn't sound like that at all. But he had a secret brother, Isukiri, and that he took Jesus' place on the cross is like the least Jesus thing I've ever heard in my life. Is I could have my brother take the fall and have him be fucking crucified alive by the Romans. That's like, yeah, that's what Jesus, that's really loving your brother, man. It's like, you fucking get up on that goddamn thing. I ain't do that shit. That's crazy. I'm gonna go to Japan. I'm gonna go to Japan and marry a 20-year-old Japanese woman named Miyuko and start a new family as a rice farmer. That's what I'm gonna do. I love the idea that Jesus just fucked over his own brother, his secret brother, and had him take the fall. They never explained that here. I like the idea that they had to invent a different secret sibling. They don't put the Isukiri thing in there. But that's hilarious and amazing. The other big question you are left with in this episode is Carmilla supposed to be the daughter of God? Like, did the Immaculate Conception happen? Right? Like,
she just calls Joseph her father, so I wonder if they're just rejecting the divinity of Mary. But I don't know. I like the idea that maybe God sent two children, a vampire and a hero, and wanted to see who will win out. And, God, that sounds like an Old Testament God kind of thing to me.
Yeah, well, because, like, the other option is that, like, it's all a coincidence that, like, that none of the sort of more magical elements of the Christian faith actually happened. It's not Immaculate Conception, none of that. It's just normal, Joseph and Mary had a good time, and here's, Jesus and Carmilla, another name that was definitely around Jesus Christ's time. But if that happened, well, then just by coincidence, Carmilla just happened to be an actual vampire. And the whole thing of her brother then becoming a prophet and, like, being hailed as the son of God and all of that is a coincidence. But the actual magical thing that happened between Mary and Joseph was that they had a secret vampire daughter. That is also hilarious. So either way, either it's God's doing some, like, fucking, I'm balancing the scales shit. I'm going to give you the force for good and the force for evil, which is amazing. Or it's like the Jesus thing just happened to happen. The real magical shit that happened here was the crazy vampire girl. Both of those I love.
And here's the thing, Sean. This is one of two Jesus episodes that rewrite the life of Jesus Christ. We're not done. Preview for later in today's episode.
Should we just jump to that one?
Okay, do you want to? Yeah.
I feel like we just got to take the Jesus package as a whole, because it's like... It's so much, and it's like, we don't want to recap this conversation when we talk about the fact that also apparently Jesus was a master painter who could embed hidden maps in his own paintings, a la National Treasure, to lead you back to the stable in which he was born for his secret treasure. Because that's also something that Jesus Christ did in this world. He also was like a pirate that buries his treasure and leaves a secret map for it. That is also Jesus Christ's life. It's like he was that and fighting his vampire sister.
Okay, so jumping ahead, another episode we watched is episode 114, The Secret of the First Supper. There is no pun title here anymore because we're past where the dub went, but I want to know, because that one of Your Brother Was Such a Nice Guy is such a good title. I want to know what they would have done for 114. But 114 is about this lady who once... I don't even know how to describe this.
This lady Nova, presumably Nova Iscariot, if you know where her family name is.
But this is Lady Nova, who is making this professor develop these X-ray eye drops because she has a painting that was drawn by Jesus Christ himself called The First Supper. It is his fabled masterpiece. I want to stress this is all very matter-of-fact in the episode. Nobody in the world of Lupin finds it weird that Jesus was also a painter.
Yeah. This was later restated by Fujiko as a thing that is like common knowledge, that like Jigen's heard about it. So in the world of Lupin III, it is just commonly understood that Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago was also a master oil painter in the style of what later you would identify as Renaissance paintings, a la The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. Apparently, fucking Jesus Christ was really far ahead of the curve in terms of art movements and technology. And that he had a masterpiece called The First Supper, and that apparently Da Vinci fucking ripped that shit off 1,400 years later.
Yes. So, in the first couple minutes of this episode, before you even get to Lupin and Jigen and all of that, you have this fabled masterpiece where Jesus apparently, within the painting, hid the location of the inheritance he received from the Virgin Mary, and she needs the X-ray eye drops to see the map that is under the paint. And this first scene of the episode is capped off with the sentence of Nova turning to the camera, explaining her motivations. "This is a matter of pride for me, as the blood of Judas." And I laughed so hard at that, Sean. I had to pause the episode. I was laughing so hard it hurt. I scared my dog. I was texting you. I was texting my brother. We had a whole exchange last night where I went, "Sean, have you gotten to the second Jesus episode?" And again, we haven't even gotten into the meat of this thing yet, but the idea that we open an episode with a descendant of Judas Iscariot who is swearing revenge on Jesus. I love this show so much, Sean. I love it so much.
I mean, it's amazing, because the other thing we haven't said, if people haven't actually watched this episode, is just to make it clear what the First Supper is it's like the Last Supper, but Jesus and his disciples are all little kids that look like they're from fucking like Charlie Brown or something, and they're all like stood up on the seats at the table, and they've got like their thumbs in their mouths and shit like that. And that's what the First Supper is Jesus apparently drew him and all his buddies as little kids having dinner at a big old dinner table, and he called it the First Supper.
It's like the Muppet Babies version of Jesus. It's Jesus Babies.
It's so fucking good. And it's like, and so yeah, we had that text conversation last night where you were watching the episode and I hadn't seen it yet. It was literally, I was about to sit down to start watching some Lupin episodes, and it was the next one on my list. And you sent me this text. I'm like, what the fuck? There's another Jesus episode? And you're like, to see if you can figure out at what point I laughed so hard I scared my dog. And I watched, I think, 90 seconds past the opening theme, got to the line, "This is the First Supper, a legendary painting by Jesus Christ," while looking at an image of a bunch of kids around the Last Supper dinner table. And I started cackling so hard, I paused the episode because I couldn't pay attention to it. I reversed a couple of frames, took the picture, sent it to you. Then I started watching the episode again, got to the point where you start learning that the First Supper painting isn't just a painting, that it's a National Treasure style like Ancient Secret, where he embedded with secret paints a map, but it's only half the map to his like legacy or his inheritance is what it is his inheritance. Again, like he's fucking Blackbeard or some shit, and leaving a map to his secret Jesus treasure, which is fucking amazing. And then you get a line where you find out that Nova is the descendant of Judas Iscariot, and she's doing it to get revenge for Jesus. At which point I started laughing so hard again, I paused it, took a picture, and as I was taking a picture on my phone, I get a text from you, Jonathan, replying to my earlier text with that image, because I was about to send it to you, because I'm like, I think this might actually be the one that Jonathan laughed so hard at, and I was right, it was that second one. But oh my god, the first like 4 minutes of this episode, because all of that shit happens before the fucking title card comes up. After she says, "I'm doing this in the name of Judas," that's when the title card pops up on screen. And it's like, at that point, I'm like, man, I gotta take a break. It's like, I gotta take a walk or something. Like, I'm full. That's enough. That's a dense 4 minutes of fucking television right there, man.
And here's the thing. I actually think this is a super solid episode of Lupin the Third. It's like a heist episode because the whole plot is that Nova then tricks Zenigata by writing him a love letter and promising to marry him, but she'll only marry him if he can catch Lupin the Third first. And she needs Lupin caught because she's trying to find Jigen Castle, which is where Lupin the First left his treasure, because, by the way, the Jesus First Supper painting was torn in half, and Arsène Lupin the First, the fucking Maurice LeBlanc character, stole half of this painting and hid it in his special castle. So she gives Zenigata the eye drops, and now Zenigata can see Lupin on his gang through disguises and everywhere, and so they are chased until they have nowhere else to go but Jigen Castle. It's a really good, just basic meat and potatoes Lupin chase episode with Zenigata, where the plot is about this whole fucking Judas blood pact thing. It's insane.
Yeah, it's so funny, too, because most of the episode doesn't need to be that. Like, for the whole middle stretch of the episode, before you get to the end and you find out what the treasure is and all of that, it's fairly irrelevant that it's all connected to Jesus Christ and Judas and all of that. Like, it could have been anything. It could have been a secret long-lost pirate treasure or whatever. It's just this, insane spice you have put on this whole episode is in the back of your head. You're thinking it's Nova's descendant of Judas, and she's doing this to find the secret Jesus map that Lupin the First stole. Because you also get a whole flashback that shows that, Lupin the First apparently knew that the Judas family had the First Supper map or whatever, and he went to go steal it from them. And as he was stealing it, he was holding one end of the map, and I guess Nova's dad or someone else or grandfather grabbed the other end, and it got ripped in the middle, and that's why it's split. And the Judas family has one half, and Arsène Lupin got the other half. And that they needed the eye drops, apparently, were the only way to find the secret. Because, again, Jesus was such a master inventor and painter that he was able to embed this super detailed map with, a grid and all this kind of shit. It looks like a modern topographical fucking map of the Middle East, basically. And he was able to embed that into his painting of the First Supper. It's pretty impressive stuff that Jesus was able to do.
Yes, so this is an episode about Nova Iscariot, great times 20 granddaughter of Judas Iscariot, romancing Inspector Zenigata. Goro Naya is on fucking fire in this episode because he is so enticed by the thought of love that he's finally willing to put the Lupin stuff aside. In the middle of the episode is where you get the fourth wall break where he goes, "Lupin, our manly drama ends today. The next episode of Lupin the Third will be a melodrama starring me living for love." Which is so great. You have this really fun sequence in the middle where there's this whole train that they're on, and Lupin manages to trick the cops by having Fujiko go out without a bra because they all have the X-ray drops in their eyes. Then there's a whole thing where Zenigata arrests the wrong Lupin because Lupin put a man in 2 Lupin costumes.
Yes. So the eye drops looked through one mask and just saw the other mask underneath it, which is so good.
You have Goemon and Jigen making a separate train track out of liquid nitrogen using Zantetsuken and Jigen's Magnum to shoot and cut so that the train can go off the tracks. And because it's liquid nitrogen, it'll disappear and then Zenigata won't be able to find them. It's a really fun, crazy heist episode. But then I have this line in my notes: the gang goes to Israel. That alone, amazing. And here you learn the entire backstory, which is that Jesus made this painting 2,000 years ago for the Virgin Mary. Judas found out about it and wanted the treasure for himself. And that is why he sold out Jesus to the Romans, because he wanted the buried treasure. And that is the whole backstory of this thing. And then you go to the stable where Jesus was born and they find the treasure. And Sean, what is the treasure?
Oh, the treasure is Jesus' baby bottle, which he buried under the stable that he was born in. It is the bottle that he fed from, given, with Mother Mary. And it was just, I guess, so important to him that he buried it there and made a whole secret map to find his way back to his buried baby bottle.
And the last shot of the episode is zooming in on the painting of little baby Jesus sucking on the baby bottle.
And because the one thing that really stands out about the First Supper the whole time is that all the kids are animation cells. Like, you can tell that they're supposed to be able to move, because they just look so different than the background. And you don't get the payoff for that until the very end, with the painting you zoom in super tight on the painting, and then you get Jesus, and he looks into camera, and it zooms in, and then he's holding up. You see that he's been sucking on the baby bottle. What I had thought was him sucking on his thumb, because earlier in the episode, you get a look at that side of the painting, and I paused it to, like, identify, wait, okay, there you can see Jesus, because I so wanted to see baby Jesus. And I thought he was sucking on his thumb. He was actually sucking on the baby bottle. He takes the baby bottle out of his mouth. He looks straight at the camera, and he, like, sticks his tongue out. And it's, like, basically a ba-ba-ba-ba-ba, that's all, folks. Like, Looney Tunes style ending with baby Jesus looking to the camera after suckling off of a baby bottle.
And you texted me that picture and the words Jesus fucking Christ, which I think is the correct reaction.
That is also, this was, since we just watched this last night, I was like, I don't need to take notes on this episode. I'll remember it well enough. So that is also that's the only thing I wrote in my notes for this episode, was just the sentence, Jesus fucking Christ. Which I like to think is just what the English title would have been. They would have just given up and just said, oh, Jesus fucking Christ, and just put that on the title screen.
We also have the line here where Lupin looks at Fujiko as she's holding the milk bottle and says, I prefer Fujiko's milk jugs to Jesus's baby bottle any day, which that cell is maybe the most Mad Magazine thing in the history of Lupin III. It is like, if you look up irreverent in the dictionary, It is that fucking frame with those subtitles. Like, genuinely, I think this is a great episode, Sean. This is fucking A-tier Lupin III. So good. Something about Lupin has an adventure with Jesus. It's always great. I don't know what it is, but this one fucking slaps.
Yeah, like, if the rest of if the Jesus stuff was replaced with a more normal historical figure, like if it was Napoleon again, they used Napoleon like 3 or 4 times for this shit. You wouldn't really bat an eye at it. You'd just be like, oh, this is just a really good heist episode. And that would be it. But the Jesus thing just puts it into this incredibly surreal territory. Obviously, particularly for us, because, America is such a Christian-dominated relationship, or nation. We all have a different, a strong relationship with Christianity. Whether you're Christian or not, you have to have one if you're American. Like, you can't.
My dad was a Lutheran pastor. People probably don't know that about me. But, I was raised on this shit. Yeah.
Yeah. And even I wasn't raised with it because my family's not Christian, but you have to have a relationship with it in this country. So it's for us watching it, obviously we're going to have a much more outsized reaction to this than the Japanese audience. Now, to be fair, I did Google around in Japanese about these 2 episodes, and there were a lot of Japanese people also this is kind of crazy, huh? I think they get this, this is pretty out there, even then, but obviously you're not going to have this level of reaction. But yes, this episode, I think, unlike the vampire episode, I think the vampire episode is not particularly great. I think it's just this kind of a bunch of vampire cliches strung together with some really weird plotting, and then you just get the Jesus shit just comes out of nowhere and slaps you in the face, but is also not particularly important to the story of that episode. So it's if you took the Jesus stuff out of that vampire episode, it would be so forgettable. You would just be like, oh, that was the vampire one. You'd never think about it again. It's just that all the Jesus stuff in there makes it so insane. You can't help but fucking stare it in the face and be driven mad by it. This one, it's a good episode on its own terms. It just gets launched into kind of legendary status by the insanity of what it does with Jesus. And then there's just a whole other aspect of this where you just can't help but imagine what was Jesus like in the world of Lupin III? He just seems so cool. He had this secret twin vampire sister that he battled or something, for whatever reason that she was so mad at him. It seemed like they had some sort of feud. He was leaving secret treasure maps, he was trying to set up the next Uncharted game or something. I just wanted the TV show. This is what I texted you. I just want the TV show that is about Jesus Christ in the world of Lupin III, and that's it. That should be its own 24-episode anime, the life and times of Jesus Christ, finding out how he got away from the crucifixion. Did he have some crazy scheme if it wasn't his brother? Did he create a identical wax replica of himself that he made. If he can make this map, like, surely he could do that and put that up on the cross, and that's how he escapes to Japan, where he becomes a fucking karate master or some shit. I don't know what he's doing there. We don't find out much about his life in Japan in that episode, and it doesn't have to follow that folklore. So, like, there's so much material to be mined with this fucking, you know, the legendary genius inventor, Jesus Christ, battler of vampires in the world of Lupin III. I want that TV show.
There's the Fujiko show, Lupin III, the woman called Fujiko Mine. I think we need Lupin III, the man called Jesus of Nazareth. And It will be a glorious series. Sean, let's try to summarize the story of Jesus in the world of Lupin III. So he is born, twin siblings with a vampire named Carmilla, who his father, his adoptive father, Joseph, abandons to the wolves. He then, at some time in his life, inherits treasure from his mother, the Virgin Mary. I guess that he doesn't inherit treasure. He has the baby bottle, and he decides to treat it as treasure. He buries it under the stable in Bethlehem. He becomes a master painter, and apparently masters perspective 2,000 years early, and paints the First Supper painting on this fucking treasure map to hide the location. Judas learns about this because Jesus, I guess, has been spreading the story that this is valuable treasure. And so Judas now knows that there is a treasure map and thus betrays Jesus to the Romans for his 30 pieces of silver and then is foiled, being unable to translate the map. Somehow, Jesus, because we see the image of Jesus crucified in this episode, so he did something to make the crucifixion happen, but he lived, and then he went to Japan to challenge his vampire sister, where he died in a small Japanese village called Hebrew Town. Again, you are correct. We need the show, The Man Called Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's just... Because also somewhere in there, also his mother did have a solid gold statue made of her. That is the thing where I can understand why Judas is like, this map to Jesus's inheritance, like, this is something I need. Because if everyone knows about the solid gold statue of his mother that he cherishes so much, surely the thing that he made a secret map to must be the real fucking deal. Like, you know, you can't blame Judas for thinking that there was going to be something very important there, because this is clearly a much more materialistic version of Jesus than you are used to if you read the Bible. Yes.
Oh my God. I know we have been on the Jesus shit for a while here, but hopefully you all understand why. This is... I did not expect this, Sean. I chose these two episodes. The vampire thing, I didn't know about the Jesus connection. I just thought it would be fun to do a Lupin vampire episode. And the other one, I saw the First Supper thing, but it was more because it was a episode about a Lupin the First treasure, and I always like the ones where Lupin is going after his grandpa's shit. Those are generally pretty fun. I didn't choose either of these for the Jesus connection, but man, there must be a God because this exists, and it is too good to have been made by accident.
Yeah, and as far as I can tell, these are the two Jesus episodes, because I looked to see, I tried to figure out if there were other ones we didn't see, and I couldn't, you know, there might be something that's like incidental enough to an episode that it wouldn't have come up, but I don't think there's any other episode that features the life and times of Jesus Christ to the extent that these two do. There is a Mecca set episode that I think deals with Muhammad in some degree that I saw in a Next On preview that I'm very curious about. I do want to watch that episode to find out how it deals with that subject matter. And I can only hope that there's a Moses episode somewhere in there so that you can complete the trilogy. But yeah, it is, you know, yeah, I'm not a believer, but this pushes me more in that direction. The fact that we just somehow, for completely coincidental reasons, stumbled on this two insane Jesus episodes of Lupin III Part 2, there's some kind of divine providence at work in that.
I also want to mention the next episode preview at the end of the second episode, episode 114, has Lupin going after the Mona Lisa, and I call bullshit on that. The Mona Lisa is sewn into a fucking sailboat from the end of part one, remember? The Mona Lisa is no longer a thing. That should be taken off the table. He's got to go after a different painting.
Yeah, I mean, at a casual glance, there seem to be about 3 or 4 different Mona Lisa episodes of Lupin III Part 2. So all of them seem to have forgotten the continuity of that 5 years ago. Sometime after Lupin spent an entire year in prison to fuck with Zenigata, he sewed the Mona Lisa into a sail on a boat and sailed away.
I love it. I love the continuity of Lupin the Third, even in the short amount of time we've been watching it, is so fucking nutty. I mean, it's impossible, but I love trying to string it together. It's the best show to try to headcanon in the world.
Yeah, it's not since I watched the third Doctor Who episode that gives a different explanation for how Atlantis happened. Have I seen a show that has a more confusing fucking continuity?
All right. Back on track, Sean. Episode 36 is where we left off, and this is Uncover the Secret of Tsukikage Castle, or The Riddle of Tsukikage Castle. Where's the pun? Come on. I wanted a pun.
Yeah.
This is an episode I chose because it is where we meet the Fuma Ninja Clan, who are the also the villains in the movie, the fourth film, the Fuma Conspiracy. And I just thought it might be interesting to see the Fuma Clan in action. This is a Goemon episode that is not particularly notable. There's some fun stuff with Lupin solving some riddles, but it's not a particularly essential episode.
Yeah, I think it's like a solid episode is how I described it in my notes. It's like not amazing, but not bad. The Goemon stuff is fun. You know, it's got that kind of classic treasure hunt or like treasure heist movie kind of plot setup, like a Indiana Jones kind of thing, where you've got two different factions, the good guys and the bad guys, both going after this secret treasure that is like hidden behind all these puzzles and riddles. And then it does the classic thing where the good guy gets captured. They make him solve the riddles for the bad guys, but then he gives them a fake solution. And so they think they have the treasure, but they have the wrong treasure, and then he gets the real treasure. You know, it's a thing you've seen in like a dozen movies, but it's such a solid plot structure that it like works well. You know, it's just that kind of like a very workman-like episode, this one.
My favorite part of it was the riddles. There's this whole thing where they are told a riddle about there being... like when the sun shines through the tree, and Lupin realizes it's referring to a kanji where you have the different radicals, the radical for tree and the radical of kanji, sun behind tree, and you put those together, that's the kanji for east, and so that's how he knows where to go. There's another one involving numbers and all of that, and like language, and I think all of that is fun. There's a moment at the end where they're doing a zipline escape from the castle, and Zenigata is throwing coins the way that the ancient Heiji Zenigata would. He looks like fucking Meowth from Pokemon. It's that part is fun. There's nothing wrong with this one, but yeah, it's solid.
Yeah, I'd love to go back and watch some of those riddle scenes in the English dub to see how do you deal with that, because they're all like they're very specifically linguistic riddles in Japanese that like if you don't know what a kanji is or you don't know how that is put together, that it wouldn't work, because they are clever. Because the way he figures it out is he's looking at like out the window at a neon sign that is glitching out, and so like it's got, I think it's a sign that has Tokyo on it, and one of the characters there is for east, the toe, and so it's glitching, and so it's only showing you the tree part, and then it's showing you the sun part, and then he puts it together. I thought that was like, it's like well written. It's very clever.
Yeah. I also want to note, this is one of two episodes we watched where technically there is no Fujiko because she only appears as someone else in a disguise. You do have, obviously, Eiko Masuyama here. You have the character model. So all 5 actors are in every episode, but this is one where that character technically is not a part of it. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I did like Ninja Lady also. I thought she was a good one-off villain for an episode.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, number 38, The Sweet Trap of ICPO, or Happy Betrayals to You. This is an interesting one where it's one of several episodes where Zenigata is threatened with being taken off the Lupin case, which does make sense. He has not made a ton of headway on it in a long time. But anyway, it is because they have hired Fujiko to do it for them, and this whole episode is about Fujiko going after Lupin, although, of course, in the end, they are working together to get this big diamond. I do love the idea. There are a couple episodes where the police team up with Fujiko, and I think that is a terrible idea for them every time, because I don't know why they would employ her. She is famously duplicitous. But yeah, this is. I think this is a fun one. I don't think it's like an all-timer or anything, but I did enjoy this one. It's fun.
Yeah, that's like basically. I don't particularly remember much from the episode. All like in my notes, it is that premise, and like this is a fun premise, a decent episode is what I wrote. So.
Yeah, so it's and it's a decent use of Fujiko. It's not as fun as I think the ones where they are actually competing, which you do get a couple of in part 2, definitely. But this is one where they wind up working together in the end. So yeah, I will say, she is packing all kinds of heat in this episode. She like takes out like bigger and bigger guns over the course of it to be like fighting Lupin, and that is kind of funny, the amount of firepower she puts into this.
Is this the one where she destroys like like 3 bridges or something ridiculous.
Yes.
Like there's a couple of points where you're like, I'm pretty sure like several dozen people have died over the course of this episode just in the background. It's pretty intense.
Yeah. All right, number 48, Lupin laughs at the alarm bell, or vault assault. This one is a super solid, like, caper episode in kind of the Ocean's 11 kind of vein, because this is the one where there is this super high-tech vault that they have to get into, and then it is on a timing lock and will be locked until 7 a.m., and so Lupin and Jigen have to be put in there, and Goemon and Fujiko do this act where they, like, are storing something in the vault, and then Lupin and Jigen are in there, and then they have to do all the job before 7 a.m. comes. It's actually, I say Ocean's 11, this is like literally what happens in Ocean's 11, is that they like put a big, the new Ocean's 11 with George Clooney, it's like 20 years old now, but you know what I mean. The remake of Ocean's 11 with George Clooney, where they put the like big case in the vault, and then it's the Asian like gymnast guy on the team who comes out and does all the work. That is what happens in Ocean's 11, and that's basically the idea here, but they can't touch the floor because the whole safe is like electrified. It's just like, this is just great heist stuff.
Yeah, I also think this is like deliberately like a Mission Impossible style thing, like the original TV show Mission Impossible, obviously not the new movies. Because there is one track, it plays in a couple of episodes. It plays in this one. There's another episode that is like this. That's a classic heist one where it's at the top of that tower. It's one of the last ones we watched. It's fucking great also. Where it's very much a like, this sounds like the Mission Impossible theme, but isn't quite the Mission Impossible theme, and it plays here.
Yes.
And it's very Mission Impossible-y, because there's all this stuff about, like, an electrified floor, and there's this whole pulley system they've rigged up with plungers that they're, like, swinging the treasure back and forth on, and all this stuff. That is super Mission Impossible-y, and it's, you know, there's a part where, like, the string breaks, and they have to, like, pull it back and, like, prevent it from touching the floor, the alarm will go off, and all this stuff. It's just a really good meat and potatoes heist style episode where the whole thing is about setting up all the different mechanisms that go into how the safe is built and how they need to try to what they need to overcome to steal it, and then the very methodical and mechanical way at which they approach that problem. And that's the whole episode. There's no like big weird twists. There's nothing like insane or crazy about it. It is just about like the process of seeing the heist go about, and it's very satisfying.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really good. I also love that Zenigata is very competent in this one. Mm-hmm. Like, his instincts are dead on. He knows exactly what Lupin is up to, but Lupin has manipulated the system such that he has no way to intervene, because the one kind of hole is that it's a crazy, like, high-tech vault, but they haven't put cameras in there. If they had cameras in there, Zenigata would be right, because Zenigata, like, sees through all of Lupin's tricks, but at the point where he's like, Lupin must be in there, they have no way to confirm it, because they do have this little hole where they can look into the room, but Lupin's even like got into the right locations where they're not in the line of that. So this is a good one where Lupin and Zenigata, no one is being incompetent in that equation. It's just that Lupin is just a little more clever on that side of the law. And I think that's always fun too.
Yeah, it's always fun when you have the episodes where Zenigata gets to be really competent, because like some of his role is offset to a third party. And so either Zenigata like gets to be right, but he doesn't get to execute it right, or there are a couple of episodes that we'll get to where he actually captures Lupin, but that's not the point of what he's trying to do. So he is able to capture Lupin because the plot can still survive whether he's captured Lupin or not. Those are always fun, where it doesn't have to make Zenigata feel incompetent for the sake of the plot to function.
This is actually, the next one does some of this. This is episode 57, Computer or Lupin, or in English, Alter Ego Maniac. This is now, we are in the era of the show where Seijun Suzuki is supervisor. That, as I said, past episode 52 is when those credits are solidified. And this is a whole episode about this professor who has built a supercomputer inside a big fucking airplane that can like change the layout of the airplane interior and thus make it impenetrable to someone like Lupin. And he's essentially challenging Lupin to come try to break into this vault. And he has all these historical artifacts in his vault, some of which are a collection of Heiji Zenigata era 1 yen coins from like ancient Japan. And Zenigata is very offended by this, that these are stolen like in this collector's vault. And so he pockets one after a little crisis of conscience. And then the whole episode is about him tracking down Lupin, and he gets the best of the whole gang. There's this fun sequence where he goes through Jigen and Goemon and then Lupin and gets all of them. Lupin even says, "Pops is on fire today." And Zenigata says, "Once I get serious, this is a piece of cake." And all of that is great, but what you learn is that he does want Lupin's help to break into the vault through the computer, but it's because he feels so guilty about stealing the coin he wants to put it back, which is not what I was expecting. I thought it would be he wanted to get all the coins back, but Zenigata is just too much of a straight arrow for that. And so, yeah, this is a fun one. I think the first half with Zenigata kind of getting one up on everyone is even more fun, but the second half with the whole computer that they have to work through is also interesting, and it's a good way to have Lupin and Zenigata team up.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun episode. It's a lot more memorable than the Morocco episode, which is a similar kind of thing, but this I think has a better core idea to it that feels less stock. It's very fun. I love the ending of it too, where Zenigata is trying to capture Lupin again, but he can't do it. And Lupin has a good line where he said, "Come on, Pops, if you want to catch me, you have to be be willing to become a thief, right? You have to be willing to go that far in order to actually be able to catch me. That's why you could do it earlier." And I like that idea that it's Zenigata has to be able to cross a line that he's never crossed before in order to be able to catch Lupin. And that's why he can't do it, is because he's not willing to cross that line usually. I think that's a good beat to end the episode on.
It is just fun to have an episode where Zenigata just goes for it and just blows through everyone, but it's in the first half. And so that's not the climax or anything. And then you move on from there. Yeah, no, this is definitely a good one. And now episode 58, definitely competitive for the title of best episode that we saw. And this is often cited as one of the best ones. Mm-hmm. The Face of Goodbye at the National Border, which is a beautiful poetic title in Japanese, and in English, Getting Jigen with It.
Hell yeah. That is probably an episode that really doesn't fit with a punny title, but goddamn, Getting Jigen with It, that's a good fucking title, man. I don't care. I don't care if it doesn't fit the tone of the episode. I love that title so much.
And I love Daisuke Jigen so much, and I love this episode so much. This is a whole one about they are trying to do this job at the opera in Moscow, or the ballet, because Swan Lake, the Tchaikovsky ballet, is playing through much of this episode. And it sounds, some of it is new arrangements by Yuji Ono of the stuff, in kind of a jazzy Lupin style, which is super cool. But you have Lupin and Jigen doing this job, trying to get the droplet of Aurora from the jewel of the main dancer, the flower of Moscow, whose name is Monica. And Monica and Jigen wind up. Lupin is escaping, and Jigen has to shoot out a stoplight or a searchlight to save Lupin, and then Jigen gets shot in the shoulder. So Lupin has to leave Jigen behind. Jigen is rescued by Monica, and she wants Jigen to help her get away because she wants to defect to the West and leave the Soviet Union. And the result is just a stunningly beautiful and moody and atmospheric episode of anime with, I think, maybe the best vocal work I've ever heard from Kiyoshi Kobayashi in this role. This is just a killer episode. This is the one Yoshiyuki Tomino seems to have done. It's a knockout.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's just got such a fantastic sense of tone. It's very much like a Cold War era thriller, right? It's all about them trying to escape the Soviet Union. But there's this great contrast between Monica, who wants to escape to America and be free and has kind of bought into the sort of the sales pitch on America, and then Jigen, who is very kind of world weary and cynical about the whole thing, right? And she goes I want to go to America because it's I can be free and I have all these things. It's yes, but there's also violence and there's drugs and there's there's all this other stuff that's involved in this. And because he's seen the whole world, he knows that the grass is always greener on the other side sort of thing. And that the only way she can be free is if she's rich in America, not if you're poor. It's yes, in America, you can have power, you can have freedom, but you need money to have it. And I thought that was a good core of the episode that then comes around at the end where you find out that Monica isn't as naive as she's always seemed. She knows that's the case. It's why she has the jewel, and she's kept the jewel, is to sell it, and she kind of betrays Jigen, and Jigen still lets her get away with it. Just all that stuff. It's so classic kind of noir-esque storytelling that just fits onto the Jigen character so naturally, and seeing the interplay between those characters in that story about the world and what it takes to survive in it. It's just fucking great.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. The animation in this one is also killer, where you have these beautiful, like, purple and blue kind of hued drawings of kind of the snowy kind of Russian landscape that they're moving through. There's a lot of good, like, kind of moody montages set to the Swan Lake arrangements as they're moving through these areas. And so just, like, the background work in this one is really stunning. Jigen is just such a strong character here. Cool and badass. There's a moment at the end he gets captured and sacrifices himself for Monica, and then he is put in front of a firing squad, and as they're putting the blindfold over him, he's like, idiots, I don't need that kind of thing. Because Jigen is the most badass guy. He full on thinks he's going to die in this episode, and his last words are, see ya, Lupin. But then, of course, Lupin does rescue him with a hot air balloon, because...
Yes.
I want the episode where they go and visit their hot air balloon guy, because they must have a hot air balloon guy somewhere in the world who makes them all these hot air balloons.
Yeah, it's like their version of like Lucius Fox and Batman. It's like, where's Morgan Freeman giving them all these super advanced new hot air balloons?
Yep. This episode is great at just doing the sort of Jigen silhouette where he has the coolest fucking shape of any anime character ever. And then I think the ending where he tosses out the passport, because she had the fake passports for both of them, Mr. and Mrs. Ivanov, and he shoots out his fake passport, or throws it out, and then he takes out his gun and shoots it right through the picture, and that is how the episode ends. Mwah. Yeah, this is a perfect episode of TV.
And that's exactly the example of what we were talking about with the other the Rose and a Pistol episode, where that episode had a thing that was very similar to that kind of ending. That was a perfect beat, and then they added another minute of comedy onto it. Whereas here, yes, he throws out the passport, shoots it, and that's the image they end the episode on. It's like perfect. Like it's like the whole thing is tonally consistent. It's telling a very focused, consistent thematic story. It's got a real powerful dramatic core to it. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I love this one. And I love the next one. We're getting into a period here where it's just kind of hit after hit. But number 66 is Order, Shoot to Kill, or Beauty and the Deceased, which is a great one about... this is another big assassin heavy has come after Lupin. His name is Beauty, and this is a guy that Jigen had fought 6 years ago, and you have all of this. And Beauty has this absolutely crazy big fucking magnum. And this magnum can just blow everything away, and there's no way Lupin can beat him. And this is an episode that is basically like, if you like the Lupin anime team's like crazy fetishism for the reality of guns in the animation, this is the episode for you. Because a lot of this episode is Jigen telling us all about guns and really loving detailed drawings of all these different guns that they're working with throughout this episode. And this is just such a moody piece of direction. The beginning of the episode is Beauty in his like apartment, where you've got like, it's just all these still images of like bullet shell casings next to cigarettes, and the shower, and a jacket on a chair, or like an empty bottle of whiskey, and there's a neon flashing light outside, so it's these still images with these flashing lights over it. There's like this perfect film noir opening. And then of course a lot of great shooting action, a phenomenal duel to the end of the episode. Oh my god, this one is great.
Yeah, it's great. It does have a very, I think, like funny understanding of guns, though, that I find amusing. That like the idea that Beauty has a Colt Python, which is like a big, I think it's like a 357 Magnum or something like that. You know, it's like it is not the Dirty Harry gun. I thought it maybe was, because this episode has like hardcore Dirty Harry energy with like the Beauty character feels very Dirty Harry-esque, because he's a cop who like, you know, he's like kind of a dirty cop who kills people or is willing to kill people. He's like a killer with a license is kind of how he describes himself, or killer with a badge. Dirty Harry was out by this point, so it very easily could have been influenced by that, though it is not the exact gun Dirty Harry has. You know, Dirty Harry had a 44 Magnum revolver, so it's adjacent to that. But I love the idea that it's just like, oh, I've got this revolver that's so good that like nobody can possibly beat me in a gunfight. Which is like, that's not how that works, you know? Like, there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to kill him with a Walther P38 just because he's got a gun that shoots a really like big bullet that's got a lot of kinetic energy behind it. Like, the Walther P38 holds more bullets and can fire more bullets faster. Like, it's got advantages. The Colt Python has its advantages. You could also go get, say, a rifle or an automatic gun, like a submachine gun or something, and that would completely outclass this dude's fucking Colt Python. Like there's like a weird line this episode straddles between like really sort of maniac level like fetishism around this particular details of the Walther P38 and the Colt Python and all that stuff, and Jigen's crazy speech he gives is like 5 minutes about all the fiddly details, most of which is accurate. And yet the core premise of the episode is so silly from a firearms point of view because it doesn't make any sense. This is not to say that the episode's bad for that. It's just like a funny sort of like thing that the episode is doing, that it wants both to have like the harder realism of the guns while also sort of exaggerating them into this almost like kind of fantasy realm, where if you get this one gun, like Excalibur magic level super powerful gun, nobody could possibly beat you in a gunfight. I find it very funny.
It definitely feels like a version of this kind of story that you could only tell in Japan, a country where no one has guns.
Yes.
But I love it. It's such a cool episode. I know it's like, it's fetishistic-y, but it's also like just such good animation of like every fucking reload they do, the like amount of detail on it. There's one other episode we'll talk about that does this even one step better.
Yes.
But like, man, this one is really cool. And the whole idea of Beauty is using these dum-dum bullets, which are these explosive bullets that were banned in the Treaty of Versailles in 1929. And then Lupin comes up with, he's taking thermometers, getting the mercury out and putting them in bullets to make mercury bullets. And he's describing this, and he says he learned it from my beloved Papa Hemingway, which is a fucking great Yasuo Yamada line, talking about how one of these bullets could bring down an elephant, for which you get a full, like, hyper detailed animation of an elephant being shot in the head and falling to its death, which is one of the most disturbing images I've seen in an anime. And then the ending is this amazing duel where they are like on a building, and there's the sun is like this massive, like, I guess it might even be the moon in the sunset or something, but it's a really crazy, like, hyper, colorful image of this sunset. And the final part of it is Lupin having Jigen use his shoulder to line up the shot, and then when they fire the gun and blow Beauty away with the mercury bullet, it is the most like graphically violent thing. There's like not technically blood, but he fucking blows up and disintegrates. You see his shoes falling into the air. His magnum goes up. And then there's this great moment where the smoke in front of the sun, and then it blows away as the magnum falls onto the ground. And that's how the episode ends. It's crazy. It's such a good, like, hardcore spaghetti western kind of thing.
Yeah, it is like a shockingly violent ending, where, as you say, you're not seeing his blood and guts go flying around, but there's this like very visceral, oh, that dude just exploded. It's like, you don't, like, this is a show that is willing to have Lupin kill people, but it usually doesn't feel as direct as, oh, he fucking killed that guy.
Yes.
Yeah. One of the other things, though, about this is like some of the stuff with like the gun stuff, where the dum-dum rounds they're talking about are just expanding rounds, like hollow point rounds and stuff like that, which is funny to me because it's like, well, yes, so in war you're not supposed to use those, like, that's real, because they're more likely to kill people, like they're made to, well, they're not necessarily made to kill people, but the effect of the bullet, it's like more likely to kill people because the bullet expands when it contacts whatever it hits, making a bigger hole. But the other thing that does is it prevents bullets from penetrating targets because it's got more mass and more volume, or it has more volume, so it's going to slow down more. So those bullets are used by police officers around the world because you're far less likely to hit somebody else or cause any collateral damage because the bullet's going to stay in the target's body. So, like, it's totally appropriate that this dude is using those bullets. He's the police officer. He's supposed to be using those bullets. So it's like, he's not a soldier. He's not going to war. And also, they would not blow up a fucking boulder. Those are, like, real common bullets that are used by police officers all around the world. So it's like, it's that thing where it's like, it's very funny, like, where it will exaggerate or pick specific details, and where it's like, just like, hopefully the audience hasn't played enough video games to know enough stuff about guns to know that this is very silly.
Yeah, I did not know any of that, I will say, but that is definitely interesting. But it's still such a fun episode.
Yes, it is. It is a great episode, and I love its like weird those two sort of sides of it, of how it sort of fetishizes firearms, but also like exaggerates everything about them in this crazy way.
Number 69, this is another fan favorite that was recommended to me. The Woman Pops Fell in Love With. Best title in the series in English. Zenigata Get You Into My Life.
Gotta get you into my life.
Indeed, and this is one about Zenigata falling in love, as it intimates in the episode, in the title there. And I don't know if I thought it was as great as some of what I heard from its like kind of reputation among fans. I see why people like it. It is a fun one. It's about Zenigata falling in love with this mute woman, Laura, who is the I kept writing daughter in my notes, and that's wrong. She's technically the widow of this fucking of Pomade Jaws, a billionaire who became a billionaire by keeping like research on all of these, like scandal research on all these powerful people, and a New York mafia boss, Al Cabane, wants it. And so he ran over Pomade Jaws with a dump truck, which we see in a flashback, and it is extremely funny because it is just Al Cabane himself driving a dump truck and running over this dude. And anyway, Zenigata employs the help of the Lupin gang to try to save her. Laura dies in the middle of the episode in a pretty fucked up sequence that I don't think the episode, which is otherwise pretty like light on its feet, is really ready to deal with.
Yeah, I didn't particularly like this episode that much, honestly, because it's so tonally all over the place. Like, one half of it is very silly and funny, and then it's also like the darkest episode we watched, other than maybe the torture episode. And I kind of came away from this being very sort of confused about what the episode wanted to be. Like, I think you could do a much more dramatic, darker Zenigata episode, because the other thing is, like, at the end of this episode, Zenigata just lets the dude get fucking killed, you know, which this is the guy a few episodes in what we're watching ago, like, was so guilt-ridden over pocketing this one coin from this dude's collection that he created a whole heist to go put it back. And now he's just sort of like sanctioning the death of this man and his entire gang as he walks away coldly and the whole thing gets set on fire or whatever, which is a cool shot. But that's so out of character. That's so far for Zenigata that you could do it, but the whole episode has to be like built to do it. And a lot of the episode is silly in tone. Like, a lot of it is like goofy. Like the fake Al Capone is a very silly, goofy character. You can't kind of take him seriously at all. He's just a caricature of a mob boss. And it's like, you know, we have other characters, like Beauty in the Beauty of the Deceased episode is a very serious antagonist. At no point does that character feel ridiculous or over the top. Like, outside of like everybody in Lupin is slightly ridiculous because it's a heightened setting, but he's a character you take super seriously. The Al Capone dude is just complete bonkers. And he feels like he should be in a much more ridiculous Lupin episode, whereas this one is exceedingly dark.
Yeah, it ping-pongs around a lot. And it's funny because you can see the, like, darker version of this that would have been, I think, a really powerful episode. Because, like, the scene where Laura dies and Zenigata carries her body out of the hut or of the cabin they're in, and they're in this windy forest. Like, the animation is like really beautiful. The final scene where there's this tape playing of her voice, and then the building blows up, and Zenigata is walking away as it blows up, and it billows his coat, and the animation is spectacular. This is one of the last ones Yuzo Aoki did key animation on for this series. He later, for the rest of the show, he mostly did storyboards, and then he comes back in part 3 as like the lead animator. And it is tremendously well produced in those moments. And I think that's probably why people remember it with the fondness they do, because I think if it were that version of the episode where it was this story about Zenigata going to a pretty dark place, it would be great. The problem is that is contrasted with some of the silliest stuff in the whole show. And I agree with you that it is kind of whiplashy.
Yeah. This is also, I'm having a hard time remembering exactly what her role was, but I wrote a note on this one that says Fujiko is straight up evil in this episode in a way that feels off. Because she's working with the Al Capone character, right?
Yes.
And it just, there was something about her role in this that just felt like that is too far for Fujiko. Like, she's not, it's just like a lot of the other things, it just felt miscalibrated how she's used.
But like also, she's not in most of the second half because it winds up being Lupin in disguise as her, and they've kidnapped Fujiko, and they just never resolve like what was she up to. So I think that's part of it, is that we don't know. Usually, like with Fujiko, you learn something else or whatever, but it's just like she just kind of disappears. It's weird. Yeah,
because the whole thing is that, like, for how fake Al Capone is trying to open this safe, and the only way to open the safe is to get the woman to say something, because it's like voice coded to her. But if anyone opens it without her deceased husband having done his passcode first, which is never going to happen because that guy's dead, she's going to explode and die. Which is fucking ridiculous. And it's like, that's one of the things that already is like, that's such an out there weird premise that already kind of puts it off of that darker, more mature tone you're looking for later. But that means that Fujiko, who fully, as far as we can tell, understands that, like, helping Al Capone means killing this lady. Like, that's what opening the thing is, and getting the treasure only happens if this completely innocent woman who had this, like, abusive husband, if she gets brutally murdered, that's the only way you can get your fucking treasure. Like, that's so far for Fujiko, who is willing to be fairly amoral, but is never fucking murderous, and isn't willing to, like, get that at the cost of an innocent person's life. Feels way too far for her as a character.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it really, it feels like kind of two very different scripts that got mashed together in a really awkward way. So who the heck knows? Yeah, not one of my favorites. Let's see. The next one, 85, the ICPO's Secret Plan, or the Secret Order of ICPO. This is the one about the ICPO director, Jasmine, who is going to retire because she wants to get married. And she has an airtight plan for arresting Lupin, but also possibly ensnaring Zenigata as her husband. And the whole plan is she and Zenigata are posing as these characters, basically like the son of this New York mafioso and the woman he's running away with. And it all winds up in this sort of adventure in Venice. It is a tremendously elaborate plan that Jasmine has cooked up with a ton of play acting between her and Zenigata that is there to sort of trick the game. And it's actually very fun, I think, once you know what's going on and see the sheer melodrama of like the script she's written for them. It's a fun one, definitely. And I think just the performances that Zenigata and Jasmine are having to put on, which the Lupin gang is not really fooled by, is pretty funny.
Yeah, all that stuff is very fun. I remember the resolution of this episode I thought was very Lupin-ish, where they're trapped in this like crazy contraption of a jail cell that's like full of spikes that if you touch it just like shoot out and like try to stab you. And the way that Lupin gets out of it is he takes Fujiko's bra and like as the spike comes out, he like wraps the bra around it in this crazy way that like gets it all stuck, and then they jump through the gaps. And it's like, that's very Lupin. That's just like the way it's sort of taking this weird sexual quality to it and using that in this kind of gag way to get out of the pinch is fun.
Yeah, I enjoy all of that. And I think what's fun is that like the plan does work. Like Zenigata and Jasmine do catch them in this like hyper, like Lupin kind of knows what's going on, but he still gets captured because he basically underestimates what Zenigata and Jasmine are doing, and they get caught. And so for the second half, or the last like 5-10 minutes or whatever of the episode, they're trying to get out of this cage. And Zenigata and Jasmine fully think they've won. And so Jasmine is like committing to like, she's retiring. She's trying to get Zenigata, who she calls Zenny through the episode, which is great, to try to commit to marrying her. And Goro Naya is just so good at like, Zenigata who's basically a big fucking kid, like very having cold feet about the whole thing. And then of course Lupin drives by and Zenigata is very relieved to be able to go back to fighting, I think. Even though he says Lupin has ruined his romance, I think he knows what his true love is.
Yeah. It's a good episode.
Here's an episode I love. 94, Lupin versus Superman, also called Lupin versus Superman in English. And this one is so crazy to try to explain. But this is about a small family grocer in New York City that cannot keep up with the big new supermarket that has opened. But Fujiko comes to them with an offer because she has a plan to put the big store out of business. And what it is this is a revealed kind of over time. But what it turns out is that this grocer has he has quintuplets, identical quintuplets. Yes. He has 5 adult sons who look the same. And so what they do is one of them dresses up as Superman. And it is Superman other than the S is a dollar sign, which should be, I feel like, a tell to the people of New York about what this Superman's priorities are. But the Superman goes out and he's got the way he's able to fly is with a jetpack. And he's flying around and he goes to like these like bank buildings and everyone goes out and is like, it's Superman. And they're looking at him. And while everyone is looking, the other brothers go in and hold up the bank and steal all the money and leave. And the plan is not, I think Fujiko wants the money, but the broader plan they're doing is they rob banks 1 through 7 so that when they go to bank 8, everyone will be distracted there. But what they actually do is go to blow up the fucking supermarket, which I don't think they needed to do this elaborate plan to go blow up a supermarket, but that's okay. It's a crazy Lupin episode. But ultimately, like, Lupin is implicated in all of this because Zenigata assumes that Superman is Lupin doing some kind of crazy plan, and Lupin winds up going out to fight the fake Superman in his own Lupin Superman outfit, which is a sort of pink outfit with a big L on the chest. And this is just like, it is a crazy, silly comic book Saturday morning cartoon adventure episode, and I found it very enjoyable and goofy.
I'm kind of mixed on this one, personally. Like, I enjoyed it for what it was, but it felt like so busy in terms of plot. This is like a good example of there are so many ideas in this that get thrown together, and I kind of just felt like I couldn't kind of tell what is the episode trying to do. Like, what story is this episode trying to tell? Especially because the Lupin versus Superman thing doesn't really come in until like the last 7 to 8 minutes. Like, most of Lupin's involvement in the episode for the entire first half is nothing. Like, he's just sort of, you just get some scattered scenes of him and Goemon and Jigen doing some like American New York jokes, right? Of like, oh, here's like a hot dog.
I wrote in my notes, Lupin and Jigen just fucking around for the first half of this episode eating hot dogs, which is what they're doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
While you're setting up this like pretty needlessly convoluted plot line about Superman, where there is a pun here. Like, this helped me a little bit once I realized that's what they were doing. Where in Japanese you have the word supa, which is basically means supermarket, and he's Superman. So I think the idea, is supposed to be that there is already a pre-existing Superman mascot character for that supermarket that is basically Supermarket Man, and that's who they're dressing as. But one of the things that's confusing about the episode is I cannot understand what the relationship is with Superman. Like, why does everyone in this universe think that this Superman is like an ally of justice and a good guy and all that kind of stuff, if he's supposed to just be the mascot for the supermarket? Like, is there not an actual Superman? I kind of expected there to eventually be something recognizable. It's obviously not literally Superman, because it's probably, even for this era of anime, a little bit too far in terms of skirting some copyright shit. Although we did have that one comic book image in the Mama movie, so maybe they would just put actual Superman in there. But it felt like there's supposed to be, quote-unquote, real Superman out there who is a superhero doing superhero stuff that everyone's very excited to see, that everyone is mistaking this dude as. But that's not actually a factor in the episode. And then, as you say, the bank heist stuff makes no sense. If all you're trying to do is trash this one supermarket, well, why do you have to go steal money from 7 fucking banks if your end goal is to distract everybody so you could trash the supermarket? Like, you don't need to do any of this. You could just wait until, like, I don't know, night, and then go trash the fucking supermarket. Like, you know, you don't have to do any of this shit. It's very confusing. It's just such an overly busy episode that I don't think it allowed me to kind of enjoy what it does do, where it does have some funny gags. I really like the ending when it is Lupin fighting fake Superman, and then Fujiko comes out in a Supergirl outfit, which is also a great ending, and they're flying around on jetpacks. Like, all that stuff is very fun. But so much of the episode is not that, and kind of gets in the way of what should be the core premise, which is Lupin fighting Superman.
I understand. I totally get all of that. I kind of liked the busyness of it. I liked the twistiness of it. We completely forgot to mention there's also Inspector Geo McCreed here, who is the old-timey sheriff on horseback that Zenigata is working with. That's kind of a fun dynamic. I kind of like the idea that Lupin is, like, completely incidental to this episode for the first, like, 15 minutes. And like even like the big connection that they wind up making is in the middle, and it's because Lupin and Jigen are eating hot dogs, and Goemon refuses. He wants soba. And so the way they like learn about the little market is that Goemon goes to buy soba noodles, and the shitty little family market doesn't have the good soba, and so he like rejects them and goes to the big market. But that's how they know where it is when they realize what's going on later, which is a very weird plot connection. I also think it's weird that like this is a story about how the little family market is evil and the supermarket needs to be protected. I don't know. Sometimes I just enjoy these for the nuttiness, and this one, if you enjoy nutty Lupin, this is definitely that. But I agree it's very busy. It just depends on whether or not that works for you. And I was wrong earlier, by the way. I'm looking at my screenshots again. Lupin does not have an L on his chest. He has the Roman numeral 3, which is really fun. Yeah. I do like Lupin in his red. I said pink. It's clearly, it's one of those anime things where I think it's supposed to be red, but it comes out a little pink in the paint, like in the episode. Kind of like Shara's novel in Mobile Suit Gundam, and like his Zaku is a little more pink than red in the original version of Gundam. It does also end with Fujiko using Zantetsuken to cut 2 buildings in half, which led me to write in my notes, did Fujiko just do a 9/11? Because that is kind of what it looks like.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did, they're in New York. Like, you're not wrong. It's just like a weird episode. I think it's the thing for me for this kind of show, particularly when you have like if you've got this short runtime of 22 minutes, like I think personally, I'm just really looking for you to I'm looking for some focus in the storytelling, because you just don't have enough space to meander too much or to run around too much, because it's that kind of thing of that whole sequence with Goemon going to their little mom and pop shop is just like, it's a long part of the episode. That's like 3 to 5 minutes of a 22-minute long episode. So it's like the whole episode just ends up feeling like it was about fucking around. It's like particularly when you've got such a good premise where I didn't even think originally that the episode was literally going to be Superman. I know that you picked the title because it said Lupin versus Superman, but I assumed it would be like a bodybuilder, something like that, like something somebody called it like a Superman, but not Superman. So when I realized, this is actually going to be like about Superman, I was really excited and kind of wanted that to be more what the episode was about, because there's more than enough with that idea. Even if even with you keep some of like the way they've modified it with like the supermarket man thing and that stuff, if you made it more centrally, Lupin was like more motivated and more an active part of the plot and some of that kind of stuff, I think I would have liked it more.
That is fair. Episode 97, this is one of my favorites, Find Lupin the First's Treasure. This is one where Fujiko is working with Holmes III, another one of our characters. We had the descendants of like Arsene's enemy in part 1. Now we have Sherlock Holmes III here, and they are looking for Lupin's legacy treasure at the grave of Lupin the First, which is it's 3 items. It is a brazier of Catherine the Great, which Russia wants. It is the axe George Washington used to chop down the cherry tree, which America wants. And I just want to reference for our non-American listeners, that's not a real thing. Yes. The story is fake. And also we don't have like in the Smithsonian, the axe, not a real thing, but that's okay. This is a silly TV show. And the earpick of King Arthur, which is what Britain wants. And these are all things that it appears that Lupin the First stole 80 years ago. And so it is a big race against everybody to go get it. Holmes the third is flying around in this big fucking blimp hot air balloon with a house being dangled underneath like he's from Up. And he's flying around with that. He's got 3 assassins to stop Lupin III: Napoleon Zero, James Dobone, and Rasputin. I don't know if that's like the Rasputin who like just survived or a new Rasputin. He is voiced by Norio Wakamoto in one of his first TV credits, which is funny. But yeah, I just like this one because I think it's a very good use of the entire cast. It's Fujiko sort of in the antagonist role, which I like in this kind of sense. Zenigata, you've got in the first half of the episode, Zenigata shows off his live capture techniques because he's worried about Lupin going against these assassins and getting killed. And so he tries to stop Lupin. And then in the second half of the episode, they use those live capture techniques to stop the 3 assassins. So I think it's a tight piece of plotting. I really liked this one.
I hate to be a downer, but I didn't like this one that much either. I thought this one was... And kind of like the Superman, to me, it's that Lupin the Third Part 2 thing of where it's like, the episode's not really about anything. It's mostly an excuse to have him fight the 3 assassins in the middle. Like, the Holmes the Third character does nothing in this. And there's nothing Holmesy about him. He does no Sherlock Holmes style things. They don't play with that in any way. He could be any character, and it wouldn't really matter. And really, like, this episode is Zenigata doing the capture thing and warning them about it. Then that's the point where he tells you, and he's got the 3 deadliest assassins in the world or whatever on the plane. And then most of the episode is Lupin fighting the assassins on the plane. All the rest of it is like completely incidental. So it just kind of felt like they had some ideas for some cool scenes to do, and then they just kind of found a way to gerrymander them or like jerry-rig them into one episode. And I just kind of found it boring.
That's fair. I liked it. I liked Lupin being a little more intense in this one, in part because he's sort of defending the honor of his grandfather, and you learn that it was actually Sherlock Holmes was a crazy thief who stole these things and pretended to be Arsène Lupin, which is a great plot point. It's not one of my like absolute favorites or anything, but I liked it. That's fine. Here's one if we don't agree on this one, I'm cutting the podcast off.
No, this is one of the best episodes of the show. Yeah.
Yeah. Episode 99, The Scattered Magnum, in English, Fighting Jigen. I think Scattered Magnum is better. This one is notable in a couple of ways. First off, this is the first episode in stereo, not just for Lupin, but for anime history. This was the first anime episode broadcast in 2-channel stereo. The rest of the show was produced in 2-channel stereo, but most of those master tapes don't exist anymore, sadly. So there's only, I think, one more of the ones we watched we also had the stereo masters for, but this one does still have its stereo master, and it's actually a pretty impressive stereo mix. I like it a lot. It is also an adaptation of my favorite chapter of the manga that I've read called Spaghetti Jigen, which is specifically the final half of the episode with Jigen having this duel where he has to get to the border and Lupin has left the pieces of the Magnum as a trail for him. That's the manga chapter. Everything else they added because they had to build it out into a full 20-minute episode. But the full episode is about them going to this place, the Duchy of Blanco in the Pyrenees, to find this gold coin of Hannibal. And it's Lupin and the gang having this whole adventure sort of in the background, while Jigen is preoccupied by having been challenged to a duel by Stone Man, this old enemy of his, who they once had a duel that they were going to do at Leon Hill in the Duchy of Blanco, but Jigen missed the duel because of the shitty car he was driving. Yes. And it's all building up to that duel. And this episode is phenomenally produced, really well paced. I think it's got a great point of view on all the characters. But then you get to the duel itself, where it is Jigen having to go around and pick up all the pieces of the Magnum and put them together for the final shot. And it is definitely in the running for the best animation I've ever seen in an episode of TV. It's unreal.
Yeah, it's amazing. This episode is absolutely incredible. It is... because you've got all that stuff, and it's really important to note, like, compared to some of the other episodes we were just talking about with this problem the show could have of where it overstuffs its episodes. I think one thing that's really impressive about this is, as you identified, there are kind of 2 plots that happen simultaneously. There's the Hannibal coin heist thing that's happening, and then there's Jigen's duel. But I think they're so good at balancing that perfectly, where your focus as a viewer is basically always on Jigen's duel. That's the A plot. That's the thing you're really focusing on. And then you have the Hannibal heist is in the background that kind of is being used to kind of drive things forward and get the characters where they need to be. But then the way that all that kind of dovetails together at the end, where it becomes about how do we get away, because part of the whole heist has the setup of we get in, and then we only have so long before the gate at the wall closes and we have to get out again. And so then that dovetailing in with the duel of Jigen having to duel Stone Man, but Lupin being like, I need to get you and us out of here by that deadline, so I'm going to leave this trail, so you have to start following your revolver to put it together to get out. Like, the plotting is so tight there. They have 2 ideas, but they write it in such a way that it fits perfectly within the 22 minutes. So it's just a phenomenal piece of writing. But then you also have like the best opener of any Lupin episode, which was a scene we were talking about, alluding to earlier, that felt like I was like, is there an OVA or a movie I didn't know about that you just took this scene from? Because it is so good, where there's this whole crazy car chase at the beginning, where Lupin has this car where like the seat and the driver's wheel flip around. Ignore the fact that like that is almost certainly impossible. There's no way your car's going to work that way. But it does that, and so he's able to drive the car effectively backwards, And he gets away from Zenigata that way. And there's this whole thing where like the paint starts to chip off and it becomes like it was like a yellow car and becomes green or whatever it was. And they flip it back around and he and Jigen get like costumes on and they're able to sort of like blend in and get away. It is such an incredible little car chase sequence it's so inventive. It's super tight. It's like 3 or 4 minutes at the beginning of the episode just to like kind of give you some flavor and some action and get you into it. And then it segues into introducing the Stone Man stuff. But it's just this incredible piece of animation and choreography and direction for this little car chase scene that absolutely feels like it could have come straight out of the big car chase sequence in Mamo we talked about. It's fucking incredible. That was the thing where I watched that and I paused the episode and I was like, what the fuck is happening? Because not only is this the best animated episode of this show, as you said, this is one of the best animated episodes of TV I've ever fucking seen. And then when I started looking up some of the stuff of like the different animation studios that worked on it in the stereo and all that stuff.
Yeah, because this is a Telecom episode. Telecom did 6 episodes before they moved over to Cagliostro, and so there's a break where they weren't working on the show, but they were doing the movie. And the director of this one is Shigetsugu Yoshida. He directed and he storyboarded this one, and he is Miyazaki's co-director on Cagliostro. So he's one of the leads on that film. And I will say, Sean, if you like that car chase, you will like the Castle of Cagliostro because it has some similar energy in what it does with car action. And you definitely feel the Telecom touch here that I think you will see in that movie as well. And yeah, it's so fluid and beautiful throughout the whole episode. And like, I think you're so right about the plot. Have you read the manga chapter, by the way? I'm just curious.
No.
Okay. Yeah, this is, I read it because it's in one of the greatest hits collections, and the manga chapter is very bare bones. It is, and it's very fun because it's just, you come in and Jigen is getting ready for this duel, and Lupin is like, we've got to go, and they've pulled off some heist, but we don't know what it is, and that idea of the border is closing, and I think in the manga it's closing because they're after Lupin, but anyway, it's the same basic idea, and I love how, because this also, I should say, screenplay, this is Atsushi Yamatoya, and this is one of his only 2 solo script credits past episode 52 when he became the lead writer. So this is him taking that idea and really fleshing it out. So you have that opening kind of action sequence, and you have a more complicated version of the heist that is all about all this Hannibal stuff and Lupin. Like, it's actually a great heist episode in the background where he like has to cut the coin in half and he's following the clues and they go out to the desert and all of that is happening. But it's so good about the POV is really about Jigen, who thinks he's probably got like a coin toss chance of living or dying because he really does respect this other guy he's going to fight, and he thinks he might die in this duel. And Lupin, what I love about their little dynamic is Lupin does not have any of that worry. He fully believes Jigen will win, and that's why he does the whole thing with the Magnum, is because he knows it's the only way to get Jigen to actually run in the right direction, and he has full confidence that Jigen will be able to assemble this thing and kill the dude, and he does.
Yeah, it's incredible. There's a scene earlier on where they're setting up all this stuff with Jigen disassembling and cleaning his revolver that is just like them showing off in terms of the animation. That's the thing.
Yes.
Imagine what you were alluding to when we were talking about some of the gun animation in the Colt Python episode. That scene is incredible. But the thing you don't know at the time is that is also like one of the most clever, basically Chekhov's guns you've ever seen in script writing, because that is setting up the notion that Jigen knows his gun so well that he can, because he's having like a conversation and all this stuff while it's happening. So it's like he can just sort of disassemble and reassemble his revolver without even thinking about it. And so it is both giving you that like really good piece of exposition that's setting up everything with Stone Man. It is also just showing off the level of detail of the animation and everything they've done with the revolver, as well as planting this narrative idea that this is the level of skill Jigen has and familiarity he has with his gun, that he would be able to do this when Lupin disassembles it, which is phenomenal. There's also a really good piece of animation around Stone Man's gun, who he's using like a Luger pistol, following in with the weird trend of lots of World War II era weapons in Lupin, because his P-38 is also like a World War II era pistol. But the Luger is that really weird German pistol that has what's called a toggle action, where instead of a slide, like what you normally think of as like a modern pistol having, it's got this like weird metal toggle on top that when it fires, the toggle flips up And that's where you get this weird flap of metal that comes up the top that then ejects the round rather than having the whole like slide come back. So if you've ever played an old World War II shooter, you probably know that pistol really well because it's like it always has this very weird look and this weird piece of metal that flops up every time you shoot it. And the amount of detail they put into Stone Man's Luger, and every time he fires, you can see the toggle flipping up and the round getting ejected and shit. It's like, that is such a level of detail for a piece of TV anime. Like, how much reference they must have gotten for that gun and what it looks like when it fires. It's incredible. Like, I cannot believe that's... Because most TV anime, you can't even identify what kind of gun it is. It's just like a generic pistol thing, or it's a revolver thing, or it's a submachine gun or rifle or whatever. It's just sort of a very genericized gun that there's no detail in its operation or anything like that. And going to, they have never, as far as I can remember, anything that we've seen, they've never even done a Luger. You know, with the Walther P38, they've collected all that reference for Lupin, so they can do that for him in every episode. But for just this one episode, getting that level of detail for this one gun that this one character uses, it's pretty fucking crazy.
Yeah. And then the final duel itself, with Jigen running and jumping and leaping across the battlefield while he's reassembling the Magnum, unreal. It's some of the best animation I've ever seen. America, Japan, TV, movies. It is just like the amount of number of fucking frames of animation and the fluidity of all of Jigen's movements building to these final 30 seconds where he's trying to go for the I guess the barrel, you would call it, where the bullets go in.
No, it's the revolver.
The revolver, right?
The revolver.
Yeah, the revolver part of the... Okay, I'm not a gun person. The revolver part of the revolver, and it's bouncing all over the battlefield, and he's trying to get it. Lupin comes in and shoots it through the sky at Jigen, and there's this shot where Jigen jumps in the air, he's turning, he catches the revolver, he puts it in, and he does the little fiddly motion to like lock it in, falls down, lands, crouches, puts the gun out, shoots, and it is all this like one fluid motion with a couple of cuts, and then you have both people shoot. Jigen gets shot through the hat, and so the hat goes off, and there's some hairs that fly off, and then you have Stone Man fall. One, it is a perfect piece of storyboarding, just shot for shot, composition for composition, how it is telling the story that way. But then in the animation, and again, the shot that blows my mind is when Jigen is falling and reassembling his gun at the same time in one fluid motion, and then the match down to, it's this match cut down to him landing and shooting. It boggles my mind how someone was able to animate that.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. It's just such a amazing piece of animation, and it's a storyboarding and like just narrative moment to cap it off. Also, I think I think it's called a cylinder is what that part of the it's a revolving cylinder. Is what that part of the gun is called. But yes. But then it's also not done, because then you also get the greatest ending to a Lupin episode ever, which is the car then is trying to get away. They're getting in right as the door closes. The door closes and cuts their car in half. All the gold and shit is left behind, so their heist has technically failed. And then you have just the front half of the car with the two front wheels driving down the road with all the Lupin gang sitting in the car, but the car is, because it's only half a car, it's just sort of like a triangle, basically, with like the back of the car just dragging on the road. And Jigen is sat on top of the hood, looking forward, giving directions to Lupin, who's trying to drive, but he can't see because the car's facing up. And it's such an amazing shot. It's so good. It's like you want that on a fucking poster. It is like the Lupin shot. With Jigen on the car with his arms crossed, his fucking hat, his beard coming out, looking forward with all the Lupin gang sort of just crammed together in the front half of the car. It's amazing. What an incredible image that is.
I agree. I'm looking at it right now. I took a screenshot of that one. It's perfect. This is the best episode of part 2 that we watched, I think. I'm talking, the more we talk about it too, I think this and episode 58 are very competitive, but this is my favorite. I adore this one.
I mean, I will read you one of my notes I made immediately after watching this. I said, "This is hands down the best episode of part 2 so far. Incredible animation, fantastic direction, great music, and amazing action. The duel at the end with Jigen having to reassemble his revolver as he runs away is original and brilliantly executed." So I think at the moment, immediately watching it, I definitely agree. I think I agree now. I think this is the best episode that we watched.
Yeah. Let's talk about one. This one I also think is good, and it is also fucking crazy, and that is episode 112, Goemon's Close Call. That is underselling it, show. I'm sorry. That title, I barely even remember the plot. Actually, the plot is a pretty standard Lupin plot. There's this pair of assassins out for Lupin. It's Wolf and Rose. Wolf has a big-ass scar. Rose has a rose on her lapel that is actually a knife that she kills herself with at the end. Wolf has a gun, as a guitar that is also a sniper rifle, so that's pretty cool. There's actually some good guitar playing animation in this, Sean. It's like not
although it's
perfect,
not very realistic, because if you put an entire gun inside that guitar, it would not sound particularly good. Let me tell you, that's not how guitars work.
For TV, I will just say, like, it is not accurate to the actual fingering, but it's more than you would usually get on television for animation. Anyway, and the whole thing is Goemon is going to a hot springs, and he gets kidnapped by Rose, and the whole episode is him getting tortured. And, like, at first he's, like, suspended by his thumbs with a big ball and chain on his leg. So it's, like, gonna pull his thumbs out of their fucking socket. And it gets worse. There's a scene where Rose comes in with a fucking drill. And Goemon is being a badass and going, I got a cavity in the back. And she drills into his mouth and blood pours out. Sean, that is a scene in the Beat Takeshi movie Outrage, in one of his Yakuza movies by Takeshi Kitano, where Takeshi Kitano's character comes in to a dude who's at the dentist and just takes the drill and drills into his mouth. And I remember it being one of the most shocking things I'd ever seen in a movie at the time. They do it in an episode of this children's cartoon from 1980. What were they on? This one is nuts, Sean.
Yeah, and then the whole climax of the episode, Goemon is like wrapped horizontally around this giant fucking stone pillar with like a rope that is on his hands that are like above him, and then that's wrapped around the stone pillar to his feet. So it's like he's just sort of bent around this giant pillar. It's like, this is incredibly fucked up. Yeah, it's so dark. It's very violent. He also is just getting like whipped and shit when he's hanging by his thumbs. There's a moment where Rose lifts up the weight on his feet and then lifts it up and drops it again, and Goemon starts screaming because it's so painful. It's so fucking dark. And then the main plot of the episode is like Lupin and Jigen trying to figure out what's happened to Goemon and go save him. There's a good moment where Rose disguises as Fujiko to try to trick Lupin, but he's figured it out. And he uses that to track her back to their hideout. There's an amazing duel between Goemon and Wolf at the end, where Goemon is completely fucked up. So he has his like sword in his mouth, and kills a Wolf who has like a saber. And then Rose comes in and sees that and doesn't have the will to live on anymore without Wolf. And so she fucking stabs herself in the heart with her rose knife. It's very dark, and fucked up.
It's incredible. I think this is one of the best ones. This one totally would be at home in part one of Lupin. This was like those first 10 episodes. And honestly, it's more extreme than most of those, frankly. Like, it's really out there. Because also the Lupin Fujiko scene, it's not really Fujiko, it's Rose, but it's also much more sexual than a lot of part two.
Because she's actually trying to seduce him, not fake seduce him like Fujiko does.
Right, exactly. When Lupin finds Goemon at the end, there's a very Goku returning to the battlefield scene where I think of like Goku on Earth or Namek coming back and being very angry at the villains, because you have that where Lupin like stares down Wolf and then he ignores Wolf for a second to go attend to Goemon, which is very much the Goku thing. But there's like a genuinely really sweet, tender moment where Lupin looks really guilty and is like, man, I hate that this happened to you, Goemon. And Goemon says, I would rather die than sell out a friend. And Lupin hugs him and strokes his hair as they're crying. It's genuinely beautiful. I don't know what else to say. It's fully tender and like there's no irony to it.
Yeah, and I think it's to me, this is the best Goemon episode that we watched for part two, and it is where it like feels like it fits in with part one, where it feels like this is an episode where it has to be Goemon. And they kind of identify it at the end as well, where there's this funny moment, because one of the reasons why they're torturing him is to try to find out what Lupin's weakness is, which is just Fujiko. Like, it's not a secret. I don't know why it's so hard for them to figure it out. It happens every episode. So it's like, if you just paid Fujiko some money, it's like you got your number on this Lupin dude. But they're trying to figure out his weakness. And at the end of the episode, as they're walking away, Jigen asks Lupin, and it's a very funny moment where he says, like, hey, just for reference, in case something like this happens again, what is your weakness? Because I ain't going through that shit. Like, I want to just be able to tell them that right away. It's like, I'm not as stubborn a man as Goemon. And I think it is true. There's something about Goemon that he is so stoic that you 100% believe he would never give Lupin up, and I think just really kind of keys in on that relationship in a way that is very touching.
Jigen would give Lupin up, and then Jigen would give Lupin up, and then he'd escape, and they'd go shoot the villains together, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
No, Jigen would probably deal with it in a much more intelligent way than Goemon, but there's something more something very respectable about Goemon's stoicism here.
Yeah. One note about this one is that despite its darkness, it has a fairly Ghibli-esque look to it. Mm-hmm. The backgrounds were done by Kazuo Oga, who is the guy who does almost all the background art for the Ghibli movies up through the early 2000s, both Takahata and Miyazaki. He drew the Totoro stuff, he draws on Mononoke, he drew Tale of the Princess Kaguya, and so it has the kind of like faux European setting of it is just like, I was like, man, this is weirdly like Miyazaki inflected given the content of the episode, and I think it's the Kazuo Oga touch. I don't know if he worked on any others. I couldn't find info on that, and I didn't notice him in the names of other episodes, but yeah.
Yeah, there is also a funny moment at the very beginning of this episode where Goemon goes into the bath, and as he sits down, he goes, Asore, YMCA, YMCA. Yes. And it made me pause for a moment, like, wait, what? And I had to look up. That song came out 1 year before this episode. So it's like, that was very topical. Because I was like, does that song even out in like 1978?
Yes.
I love that. I like that song apparently got so popular. And I've seen it be referenced in other Japanese media. So I know that it was like popular in Japan as well. But I love that apparently it hit that status so quickly. It was used in a Lupin episode within 1 year.
I love it so popular that even Ishikawa Goemon would sing it, and I feel like he would only do that in private. In public, he would be like, I will not sing a filthy capitalist American song. I sing Japanese music. That's what Goemon would say. But to himself, he'll sing YMCA.
Yeah. Well, but he threw in the Asore at the beginning in order to make it a little bit more Japanesey. So I think that's what makes it okay for him.
All right. Episode 114, we already talked about, Secret of the First Supper.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus Christ. Literally and figuratively. 129, another great one. In Jigen, I saw the gentleness of a man's soul. Very poetic title. And this is an interesting one because it's set in this fake South America. It's like a fake Jamaica. They call it Jamaica. And they keep talking about how many coups this poor country has, which is kind of funny. But it is basically about Jigen. They are trying to steal this naked Venus painting that was stolen by Hitler in World War II. And Jigen winds up paired with this woman who is trying to steal the painting herself. We learn is the former daughter of the president who was overthrown in a former coup, and now she is going to marry the revolutionary leader. And it's a very solid Jigen episode. Interestingly, there's an episode of the woman called Fujiko Mine show that is very similar to this in dealing with like a coup in a Latin American country. It's a Fujiko and Goemon episode, and it's a little even more overtly political about kind of America being a terrible imperialist force. But this one is really good, and it's pretty hard-edged. There's a scene in the middle where Jigen does emergency surgery on the woman and her bullet wound that is incredibly brutal.
Yeah, there's a great shot. I think you had it in your screenshots of that. It's like looking at the surgery through the flame of the lamp that's in the corner, which is an amazing shot. It's also advisably do not do anything that Jigen does at home here, because it's like, one, you shouldn't be taking out the bullet. That's a movie thing. And two, he does like the classic. I feel like you don't see people do this anymore, but the like, oh, I'm going to use whiskey, or they actually did this in The Last of Us too, where it's like, we're going to use whiskey to try to sanitize the wound. And I'm going to he takes a swig of whiskey and like spits it into his hands to like sanitize them. Like, that's the whiskey is it's not rubbing alcohol, man. Like, that's not going to really do what you want. But it's very hard boiled, it's very good.
Hard-boiled is the right word for this episode. It's a very hard-boiled kind of noir story in this South American country undergoing a coup. So it's also very intense. Like, the second half, there's bombs going off everywhere. They barely make it out. It's great.
Yeah, and the whole plot of that the painting is suspended in the air by these like very thin wires that are connected to a bomb, that if like you don't disconnected appropriately, the bomb will go off, is so good. And it creates like a great setup where like the first scene is Jigen gets into the place in a very Hitman-esque way, where he like puts on like the right disguise or whatever and gets in there. And he sees it and he's like, what the fuck? And it's just this, because he doesn't know about the wires. So it's just this like painting floating in the middle of the room, and he's just like, I need to get out of here and like figure something out with Lupin, because he can't figure out what the fuck this thing is. He doesn't want to touch anything smartly enough, which I thought was like a great hook. And then that then all connects to all this revolution stuff. Then there's a good B plot for Lupin as well, where he's trying to get into the country and having all these antics, and like he's like on the plane, and the plane isn't going to land there because the coup is about to happen. And so he sees Zenigata is chasing after the plane in this like smaller plane, and he like gets out, it gets into Zenigata's plane, and Zenigata's like, finally, you've seen like the light. Like, I'm glad you're finally becoming so cooperative. But it turns out that Fujiko and Goemon are there, and he hijacks the plane and kicks Zenigata out to get into the country. So there's like a good, that B plot I think helps break up some of like the darkness of that A plot, which is pretty violent and heavy. And then there's a great scene at the end where Jigen is trying to get it all together, and he's started doing the heist, and it seems like it's going to be too late. And then Lupin and Goemon show up, and Goemon gets a great moment where he has to cut all the wires like in one swift motion in order to not disturb the bomb, and they get the painting away. Then of course Jigen does the cool dude thing of giving it to the lady instead of keeping it for himself.
Yeah, I think you're right about the way it very much structures the Lupin and Zenigata side as a B plot, but it cuts to it very smartly of when we need a little comic relief, and it never detracts from what's going on with Jigen in the A plot. You also get one of my favorite Zenigata moments in the series where Lupin sees him and is like, man, Pops sure is persistent, and Zenigata goes, arf, like a dog. It's just a great little... Oh, man. Love that. And yeah, the ending specifically where she wakes up and she sees the painting and she says, bonsai revolution, basically. And then it cuts to Jigen in like the ruined, bombed out city, like putting out his cigarette. Just a great hard-boiled kind of noir ending. Yeah, this one's killer.
Yeah, in terms of Jigen episodes are pretty fucking good, because Jigen's pretty good.
Yeah.
And the next episode isn't necessarily a Jigen-only episode, but it is a pretty Jigen-ass episode, too.
148, the target is 555 meters away. This is a stone-cold heist masterpiece fucking episode. Yes. So good. It is about this giant, it's kind of like a version of like the Tokyo Tower or the Kyoto Tower kind of thing. And there's going to be a diamond exhibition there. And the diamonds are on the top floor, surrounded by like 3-foot, thick bulletproof glass. And the only way in or out is this elevator, and so they have to develop this extremely complex plot. The main, kind of hook of which is that Jigen has to be 555 meters away. He is on this like swaying industrial crane in the breeze, and he has to snipe at this exact spot and hit it enough times that he'll be able to break through the glass, and that is how they're going to feed through all the wiring they need for Lupin to get the diamonds. And then the second half is more Goemon focused, as he has to do all this cutting in the side of the glass to get Lupin out via the elevator. But like, if you want your meat and potatoes heist stuff done well, this is about as well as it gets done.
Yeah, this was a fun one to be one of the last ones we watched, because it felt like a conceptual sequel to the earlier one of them, the Mission Impossible one with the...
Yes.
The cranes and all that stuff, and then trying to get it out from that safe. And this is like a similar kind of setup. It's got the electrified floors and all that, but it just one-ups everything. It's like now it's like up at the top of this giant tower. There's only one way in, which is this one elevator. Zenigata is guarding it. This is a great Zenigata episode as well, because he gets to feel really competent. Like, he gets foiled in the end, but he's doing all the right things. It's just Lupin is one step ahead of him. Or like Lupin also just gets very lucky at the end. And the way that Zenigata is like guarding the tower, and he figures out, oh, Lupin's going to try to do this, so we shouldn't do that. And he actually like foils a couple of the aspects of Lupin's plan, causing Lupin to have to improvise. It's so good. There's also a phenomenal moment with Zenigata where he is like investigating around, and he sees all the bullets on the ground because it's below from where Jigen is just shooting bullet after bullet at this one red dot on the window, and he was like, oh, what is this, like a bullet, it's still hot. And then he looks up, and like one of the bullet casings falls down and lands in his mouth. It's like, ah, and he realizes, okay, something is up. Lupin is really trying to get in. There's something going on. I need to investigate this. Yeah, all the shit with Jigen on the crane, shooting over and over and over again at this one spot. He has this great moment where he's talking to Lupin on the radio and saying this. He's telling the story about how, oh, I always used to be at the carnival when I was a kid and play the target game with the pop rifle. And I would always be one shot away and miss that last shot. And if right when he says that, he fires his last shot and it goes straight through the thing, and he just casually reloads the bolt action rifle.
Yes.
This is another one where there's just a lot of good gun animation with the way the rifle, he cycles the bolt and all that. And I love him telling the story that feels like a setup of, oh, in the last crucial moment, I would always miss the prize when I was a kid. I wanted this French doll or whatever. But as he's telling the story, he just casually just nails every single shot and gets the last one right through there. It's such a good Jigen moment that undercuts your expectation that he's going to miss the last shot. They're going to have to improvise. No, he does everything completely perfect. It is great.
Everything with Jigen in this construction yard where he's on top of that crane and it's swaying a little bit, all that animation and imagery is just iconic. It's incredible. Yeah. There's this little moment where he's setting up and there's all these seagulls flying by at sunset, and he looks up at one of them and says, "Don't worry, you're not my prey," which is just a great Kiyoshi Kobayashi moment. I think the end, sort of the climax of this one, is where all the power goes off, and so Lupin can't get out of the elevator, because the whole plan is that Goemon has cut this hole in the side of the glass that Lupin is going to be able to jump through when the elevator goes down normally, but it won't go down. So he has Goemon cut the counterweight, so the elevator is flying down, and it's this really frantic little action moment that they do with a lot of these dramatic stills of him jumping and getting through the window at the very last moment. It's really cool.
It's really good. It's not how physics works, but I won't blame Lupin too much for it. It is a good enough climax that we're going to ignore the fact that he would still be falling at that same speed despite whatever he jumped at. He would probably just be cut in half by the glass. But it's a great moment. We'll give it away. We'll give it to him.
It's great. And finally, 151, the Arrest Lupin Highway Operation. This is an interesting one. This is one of the last telecom ones. It is directed by and storyboarded by Shigetsugu Yoshida, who did 99 as well. It's got a lot of the same qualities. It is stunningly animated and directed. Yeah. It's got phenomenal action sequences. I don't love the script. I think as a story, it's a little lackluster. I don't love the use of Fujiko in this one as Lupin's kind of dumb sidekick who gets kidnapped. But as a kinetic piece of motion and animation, it's tremendous. And these are all the artists who, now this one, unlike 99, Cagliostro has come out. And there are sequences in this that are very much playing on other scenes that were in Cagliostro. I think the standout moment in this one is where they're driving their car through all these fields and water, and then they're trying to go up the side of this cliff as the pieces of the cliff are falling. And it's a completely silly, comical piece of animation, but it's so well animated, you kind of buy into the unreality of it. There's a moment in Cagliostro that this is very clearly a play on, where Lupin is on foot trying to run up this kind of water slide where water's coming out. He could not possibly physically run up, but he does it, and they do this, but it's with a car. And I think that's really cool. Animation wise, you can't knock this one.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I think Fujiko's use in this is very whatever, because she's basically just a plot device to give Lupin additional motivation, which is not a great use of her. But I do think that, generally speaking, it's a well-designed episode in that the first part of the episode is this heist that Lupin thinks is going to be the easiest thing in the world. They're going to steal this truck that has a bunch of diamonds in it. He shoots a paint thing at it to get his mark on it, so you'll be able to identify that one truck amongst all the other trucks that look identical. But Pops is gets one up on him, figures out the plan, moves the seal onto a different unrelated truck, and is thus able to basically beat Lupin. So and that's like the first 8 minutes or something of the episode. So the most of the episode is Lupin trying to sort of recover from that position, steal the diamonds, and save Fujiko and get away. And so it's a very good like Lupin focused episode about him getting kind of almost similar to that episode 4 from part 1, where he gets beaten. So he's slighted by Pops, and so his pride is on the line. And so he needs to like sort of recover from that. And then at that point, it's just this like madcap frantic chase of him trying to figure out what Pops' plan is and then how to get out in front of that. And I think like all that stuff is phenomenal. Like there's a great scene where he just drives up and he just starts having a casual conversation with Zenigata while they're both driving on the highway.
Yes.
Because Zenigata's got this whole trap set like a mile ahead on the bridge or whatever. So Zenigata's not going to do anything. And Lupin kind of figures out, okay, I get what kind of thing you're going to do. He sort of like figures it out. As Goemon says, if you know yourself, you know your enemy. You need not fear the outcome of 100 battles. It isn't a Japanese saying; it's a Sun Tzu saying. But I guess Goemon's okay with it. And then, and then once Lupin figures out the plan, it's just like, how do I get in front of them? What are all the pieces I can get? Like he finds this one broken down truck that he gets Jigen to use, and all this shit to sort of cobble together a plan to solve this. And I think it's got just such a good sense of energy and momentum to it. And I like the focus. I thought it was a fun episode for us to end on because it feels like a very Lupin-focused episode. That's about him above all the other characters.
Yeah. No, and I probably sounded too down on it. I didn't like the Fujiko element in that regard. Everything else is great. And like the script doesn't even like matter all that much at a certain point because it is so much about the visual side, which is also a scripting thing, I should say. But like it is like, this is a storyboarders episode,
yes.
And it is beautifully boarded and animated. The scene where they figure out how to get, I don't even know how to describe the plan because it is so convoluted, but it's visually presented so fluidly of how they get the diamond truck onto the other side of the highway so Jigen can connect it to the tractor. It's so crazily elaborate, but it's animated so well. I definitely want to go back and watch all the different telecom ones. We'll see. The last 2 we're going to watch next week, the Miyazaki ones, are also telecom ones, and they're just at the top of their game. This is really cool stuff. And yeah, I think it is a good one to end on for that reason, absolutely. This is a post-Cagliostro episode. All the character designs are the Cagliostro character designs. They're a little different. Fujiko, most obviously, because she looks like a Miyazaki woman now.
Yes, I noticed that.
But even you'll notice it with Zenigata, just like their features are a little softer. Everyone, it's not radical, but you do notice it, and I thought that was interesting, that when they came back from Cagliostro, they brought some of that with them, which is interesting.
Right, yeah, because Zenigata, like, is very pretty-faced. He's got, like, longer eyelashes. It's like, there's something very, like, sort of, like, charming about Zenigata. He's less sort of scruffy in the redesign. Yeah. I remember noticing that as well.
Absolutely. All right, phew. Sean, we've been going for a while.
Yes.
But that is the episodes of Part 2 we watched. Man, we watched a lot of really good episodes. I know there's a couple duds, but that's what's going to happen when there's 155 of these. Man, I had fun with this. I want to watch more.
Yeah, I will definitely. I don't think we need to do another podcast on it, but I am definitely going to watch more Lupin III on my spare time. There were a few episodes that I was looking at on those next on previews. Like, I want to go watch that mecha episode. I want to learn how that turned out for them. I know there's a Frankenstein episode. I need to go figure. I need to watch that one.
One that I really want to see, I thought about putting it on the list and it got cut, is one where apparently, and there we saw the next episode preview, Zenigata does a version of Chushin Gura, the 47 Ronin, to try to catch Lupin. I really want to see that. But we are doing a little more part 2, because next week we are going to watch one of the single most famous anime movies ever made, The Castle of Cagliostro from 1979, and episodes 145, Wings of Death, Albatross, and 155, Farewell, My Beloved Lupin, which is also the series finale, both of which were directed by Miyazaki, and we will do a big send-off to Part 2 and deep dive on Miyazaki's final outings with Lupin III and effectively the launch of his feature film career.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited to watch all those. Particularly Cagliostro is one of those that's been on my list for, like, I mean, literally like 20 years or something maybe at this point. Like,
Yeah.
when did I watch Princess Mononoke? It was like, I should watch more movies like this one. And I think around that time, I remember reading online. It's like, oh, they did this Cagliostro movie. That sounds cool. And I've never fucking seen it. So I'm very excited about that. So we'll dig into all that next time on Japanimation Station. This has been a very exciting series of episodes where we've learned a lot about Lupin, a lot about ourselves, and even more about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
恋しているだが君が一番大切だから夫婦としてダメだろうってあなた言った自分にできないことをそれで自分に言い聞かせ続けるあなたは未来が